Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, the distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth Embrio International Workshop with the current theme, Current Advance in Tropical Marine Biodiversity and Fisheries. My name is Sari Nugroho, and I will be going to be your master ceremony for this lovely morning. First of all, we would like to welcome Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science of IPB University, Dr. Lucky Adriato, the Director of International Program, Professor Iskandar Zulkarnain Siregar, the speakers, Professor Dr. Andreas Lupata from Center of Sustainable Tropical Fisheries and Aquaculture of James Cook University, Dr. Mala Nurimala from Marine Natural Product Biochemistry and Molecular Biology of IPB University, Professor James Bell from Coral Reef Ecology and Marine Ecology of Victoria University of Wellington, and fellow researchers, participants, and other honorable guests. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Workshop of Embrio. Embrio, or Enhancing Marine Biodiversity Research in Indonesia, is a think tank that has developed into the Center of Excellence of IPB University in the study of marine biodiversity in Indonesia, involving multidisciplinary science. One of Embrio activities is the International Workshops. In 2020, this activity will be the fourth time. The first workshop was held in 2014. The second is in 2016, and the third in 2018. This year, the fourth workshop will be held on the current advance in tropical marine biodiversity and fisheries. This workshop would not be possible without the help and support from the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science of IPB University and the International Collaboration Office of IPB University. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the rundown of the today agenda. First, we will have the opening ceremony of Indonesian national anthem, and then we will have the report speech, also the welcome speech. After that, we will have the session 1 of plenary sessions about writing an effective manuscript from editor perspective, and then we will have the session 2 of plenary sessions about the writing a scientific article for international journals. And then we will have the session 3 of the preliminary sessions about how to write a research grant on marine conservation biology. After that, we will have the technical meeting for presentation and coaching. And finally, we will have the presentation session and the coaching session. Ladies and gentlemen, to start the events, we will hear the Republik Indonesia National Anthems, Indonesia Raya. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we will hear the report speech from the director of Embrio. To Dr. Vita, the time is yours.
Thank you for MC. Previously, I'd like to apologize as maybe my face cannot be seen in the screen because I have a technical difficulties with the mic. So I speak using different gadget. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Before I start, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Dr. Luki Adrianto, the Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, Professor Iskandar Yulkarnain, the Director of International Program and the team, Professor Andrea Lopata, and Dr. Mala, our distinguished speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. We are delighted and honored to host the 4th Embrio International Workshop with topic Current Advance in Marine Tropical Biodiversity and Fisheries. This program is a biannual event organized by Embrio. Embrio, a name standing for Enhancing Marine Biodiversity in Indonesia, is a network initiative commenced by the Vice Rector of Research and Collaboration of IPB University and coordinated under the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science. Aiming at promoting scientific innovation based on marine biodiversity resources and strengthening counteraction against marine biodiversity loss, Embrio has a vision to be the center of excellence in Indonesian marine biodiversity research. Since established in 2013, Embrio has conducted a range of scientific activities such as international symposium, workshop, summer course, as well as research collaboration, which engage various academic stakeholders. This year, we proudly present the 4th Embrio International Workshop, which is designed to improve our capacity as a researcher, specifically in publishing our works. As to our commitment to be the center of excellence, we keep developing our program to contribute more in the existing knowledge. Since our pilot project, a workshop conducted in 2014, we've tried different concepts on how to deliver this workshop effectively. And lucky us, this year, we learned a lot amid this pandemic. We're not only dealing with how to improve our program, but also how to engage participants and conducting this event online. I know it's not easy, but it's worth it. Today, the online workshop will incorporate 3 parts. First is webinar, which you enter today, and then research dissemination at 1 p.m., and also coaching session at 2 p.m. All are run through Zoom cloud meeting. Despite all limitation we have, we're pleased that we have 3 experts in international publication, thanks to Professor Andreas Lopata, Dr. Mala, and also Dr. James Bell, who will share their knowledge and experience to us. In addition, later we'll have 5 qualified editors who will give constructive feedback toward our journal articles, who is submitted at least by 30 authors today. Last but not least, we are delighted because as much as 100 delegates are in attendee session, calling not only from this country, but also from Singapore, Philippines, the UK, the USA, and also New Zealand. Thanks for your dedication to this event. I do hope you will enjoy the session follow and also get the most benefit of it. Next, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude to Professor Iskandar Zulkarnain as the Director of International Collaboration Office, and also our Dean, Dr. Luki Adrianto, because for the opportunity and for the invaluable support. Without your help, we cannot make this event come true. And to all the organizing team, thank you for all your hard works. Today is the moment of truth. Let's hope that everything is run smoothly as planned. Finally, wish you a very fruitful and joyful and also productive meeting. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Vita. Ladies and gentlemen, we will hear the welcoming speech by the Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science of IPB University, Dr. Lucky Adrianto. To Dr. Lucky, the time is yours.
Thank you, Sarin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, and hope that we, all of us, in the best quality of health. We understand that during the pandemic, there is some of challenges in terms of our health, but we believe that with our strong commitments to keep our stay in healthy, that we can uh, uh, solve the problem of this. And we do hope that the situation will be back to the normal. The distinguished director of the international collaboration of the IB University, Professor Iskandar Siregar. Thank you very much for joining us in the Embrio International Workshop for the fourth. We thought your support and provocating what's that spirit. I think Embrio will not be like this. Also, the distinguished keynote speakers or preeminent research person, Professor Lopata from the James Cook Universities and Professor James Pell, and also Associate Professor Mala Nuril Mala, that also has been delighted to join with this embryo to support our environment, especially in the context of academics and publication environment in our faculty. And also, I would like to say hello and for the distinguished all of the previous chairwoman of the embryo Faculty of Physics and Marine Science. And as you know that when I established the embryo with Professor Iskandar and the other colleges, I have an intention that all of the director of embryo should be women to respect a woman in science. This way that the first chairwoman was Associate Professor Dr. Nefiati Zamani. Thank you very much for attending this also embryo. This is your baby actually, Ibu Nefi. And now the baby has been grown and now it's already the situation. The second chairwoman, I'd like to also thank you for Ibu Associate Professor Dr. Mala Nuril Mala, also the woman, younger than Punevi, that I think this also has already set up the system of how to conduct the embryo governance during her period as chairwoman. And also the chairwoman right now of the embryo, Dr. Vita Rukmanti. Thank you very much for also organizing this embryo as the one of the center of excellence in IPP. It's not only for our faculty, but also in IB University. And we also have some networks with national universities, National Research Institute, as well as the regional and international. And also the distinguished all of the embryo, I call embryo rangers, all of the organizers of the embryo that been coordinated and led by Dr. Vita Rukmanti so far to conduct this workshop. And also, last but not least, I would like to also say hello and thank you very much for all of the faculty members of the Faculty of Physics and Marine Science, professors, the associate professors, lecturers, and all the lecturers in our faculty. And also, last but not least, all of the participants of the Embrio International Workshop. I would like to use this opportunity uh, promoting 3 points. As I always use three, Pak Iskandar and others, because three is our ABC. C is our code of our faculty. Faculty of Physics and Marine Science has a C. That's why we also always like this, because the code of the faculty is C, and C is the third letter of the alphabet. That's why that I also always have 3 points, not more. I don't know, it's for some of the business school that maybe they have more than 10 pointers, something like that. Okay. Anyway, the first point I would like to address this in this opportunity that this fourth Embryo International Workshop is part of our celebration of the IPB University anniversary for the 57th, as well as our Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science anniversary. And during this pandemic, I think our duty is actually more challenges during this uncertainty situation, at least in the last 6 months, and we still facing with uncertainty condition in the next years. I think our anniversary is not just only in the context of challenging the science for we call agro maritime 4.0 as the brand of our IPB university with the context of creating the innovation and through the integrity of our works. It's not just only about that, but how then to deal with the innovation that we can tackle the challenge of this pandemic. And one of that actually that the opportunity that we believe there is some contribution of the marine biodiversities in the context of this pandemic, especially with the context of how to increase or strengthen our immune in the context of our bodies, our health. So our faculty, for example, has conducted several workshop and discussion regarding to the opportunity of what we call how to create what we my I call actually as the marine superfood, the foods from the marine, but not just only usual food, but superfood for increase the immune of the person or all of us, for example, to deal with this challenge of the pandemic. Uh, Regarding to that, actually, the marine biodiversity also part of these issues. That's why that our anniversary, especially with our Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science anniversary, will use this marine biodiversities as one of the key points uh, to be studied further regarding to not only as the food, as the proteins intake, but also for the non-food purposes, including the health, pharmacology, as other purposes. In this regard, actually, this Embryo International Workshop has a very important, at least starting points to discuss further the role of the marine biodiversities. I call it post-normal pandemic. So this is the thing that the first I would like to stress this issue and also promoting the ideas or the points or the topics of the marine biodiversities regarding to the post-normal pandemic. The second point, international workshop of Embryo is actually part of our platform in the context of increasing the publication contribution of our faculty and also including other universities members, not only IPB but also the other universities, as we understand that actually one of the key parameters of the science is actually how to promote this science to the public, to the publication. And as always strengthened by Professor Iskandar, that publication of IPP should be increasing. That's why that the workshop is not same with the other embryo platform we call international symposium. That this workshop is ultimately has a goals to increase the publication, meaning that from this workshop, not only will taken some insight, updates, current advance of the marine biodiversity from our prominent keynote speakers, Professor Lopata, Professor Pels, and Associate Professor Nuril Mala, but also we increase the spirit of our young faculty members to increase their publication. And the number of the publication of IPP has been increasing at least 5 years, the last 5 years, and I think this faculty, I mean, our Faculty of Environmental Science has been contributing significant enough regarding to this publication. As we understood that last year we awarded by the IPB University as the second productive faculty in the publication and innovation. Number one is the Faculty of Natural Science and Mathematics, and the second award is our faculty. That's why that I'm very happy to uh, always support this in Embrio International Workshop in terms of this application proposals. But as I mentioned, the second point of publication that I just mentioned is not should be not seen as the separate things from the first point, as how we can use this publication to solve the problems of our country, including, as I mentioned previously in the first point, the challenge of how using the marine biodiversity science we can contribute in the context of tackling the problem, the solution from the pandemic. And we believe that from this pandemic, even though that we understand that there is some suffer from this pandemic, but uh, as we optimistic institution as well person, we should uh, what's that change from the threats to the opportunity. Of course, the pandemic has some threats, but we should see this as also the opportunities to our science development, taking some innovation with integrity, how to deal with this problem. At least for the next year and other 2 or 3 years, we believe that this opportunity from this pandemic can create our spirit to produce the innovation to do that. And last but not least, the third point, I'd like to, on behalf of the rector IBB universities, and I got a message from him that big apology from Pak Rector cannot join with this meeting because Pak Rector has a very important person from the Vice Minister of the Defense. As we understand that the Minister of Defense of our country has already get some trust from the government to also taking care about the food of this country. That's why that as the one of the leading university in the food science, the leading of the in agriculture and maritime science, the Vice Minister of Defense visit our university today, and our rector has to meet with him, and that's why that actually Rector give mission to me to on behalf of him to join, and later on we'll finally open this Embrio International Workshop meeting. So on behalf of that, I would like to again express our grateful thanks to all of the Embrio organizers, the Embryos, I call Embryo Rangers, and the embryo actually is not just only to strengthen the environment of our faculty in terms of science, but embryo also, in my opinion, as the dean, also part of the place of networks of the young faculty members and place of the network of young faculty members to study, to learn about how science organization, science management, and science governance in the context of especially in terms of fisheries and marine science. And I'm very happy that led by the woman is not less than led by the men. So women in science is not just only jargon in our faculty. Women in science in our faculty is the spirit of that. Even though the dean is still men, but I do hope that the next leaders of our faculty can be coming from the women. Well, men and women is same, but at least in my terms, I would like to give more opportunity to the women to lead the science of this through this embryo. So without further ado, I'd like to then uh, finish my welcome speech with obviously on behalf of the rector of IBB universities and also on behalf of the all of the faculty, physics and marine science members, I'd like to obviously open the fourth embryo international workshop with saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for everything, and we do hope that all of the process will be going well. Uh, During this pandemic, we still have to have our spirit to take care of ourselves, stay healthy and stay happy. Healthy and happy is the one thing that we have to do. That one for strengthen our immune, or increase our immune actually. So thank you very much for giving opportunity to me to
Thank you, Pak
join
Dekan.
and giving some welcome speech. And I would like to also, if Ibu Vita and other organizers don't mind, even though that there is no written in the schedule, I would like to give Pak Iskandar before the opening for the next session to also give some spirit statement for Pak Iskandar to also give some maybe welcome notes to not only for the keynote speakers, but welcome the keynote speakers, Pak Is, but also to always strengthen our spirit in IPB and especially in the Faculty of Physics and Environmental Science. Pak Sarin, maybe after this, please give 1 or 2 minutes to Pak Iskandar to give some welcome and also spirit statement to increase our environment in terms of application and international collaboration in the universities. Again, thank you very much, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih, Pak Dekan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lucky, for the welcome notes. And then we will have a greetings from the Director of International Program, Professor Dr. Insinyur Iskandar Zulkarnain Siregar, to Professor Iskandar. The time is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, MC, Mr. Sahrin. Yeah. So thank you for opportunity. I will only give very short, let's say, a congratulatory remarks to this event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Dear Honorable Dean Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, Dr. Lucky Adrianto, dear Honorable Resource Persons, Professor Lopota, Professor Bell, Dr. Mala, dear Embrio, I would say advisor or former directors, Dr. Nevi, Dr. Mala, and I should mention another name, Dr. Carsten Toms, who is now working, come back to Germany in Magdeburg University, I think, and dear Director Embrio, and all energetic Embrio, let's say, researchers or rangers, yeah, and dear participant, of course. I'm pleased to be here in the morning to see especially Professor Lopata. Welcome to our virtual event. So we never seen each other, but I seen Professor Bell many times from the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. And I would like to say three things, three happies, I said. So first one is happy to see that Embrio growing mature. So we established this hub or research platform in 2013, and until now is growing mature. And the second one is happy to see the publication contribution from the Embrio platform. So the members and the associated members are doing many kind of research relating to embryo biodiversity, which is Indonesia is one of the hotspot, and still a lot of knowledge gaps to be researched, either western part of Indonesia or the eastern part of Indonesia. The third one that I'm happy to see the network also broadening or expanding. From my experience that I learned, the network is expanding to the Japan counterpart, to US counterpart, to European counterpart, as well as to the neighboring countries like in ASEAN. Yeah, I think that the three happiness that I feel. Thank you for the leadership of the dean as well as the current director and the previous director. which is also still keeping a role as an advisor. So last but not least, I would like to wish all the participants today a very, very productive. So we would like to see you again in other events, yeah, hopefully next year or year afterwards. Then we can see face to face. I would like to specifically mention to the Professor Lopata, we would like to, if the situation is getting better, visit again Indonesia and meet with our person here in the administration of IPB University. Thank you, MC. That's all from my words this morning. Congratulations. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Iskandar, from the greetings. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we will start the plenary sessions of the workshop now. I would like to invite our moderator, Dr. Hawis Madupa, to moderate the discussions. Dr. Hawis Madupa is one of the teaching staff in IPB University. He got his doctorate degree from the University of Bremen, Germany, in biotechnology and molecular genetics. His research interests include marine biotechnology, marine biodiversity, and molecular ecology. Without further ado, Dr. Hawis, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Shahrin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, Excellencies Dr. Luki Adrianto, Dean of the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, IPB University. Excellencies, Professor Dr. Iskandar Zulkarnain Siregar, the Director of International Collaboration Office, IPB University. Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Hawis Madupa from the Department of Marine Science and Technology, IPB University, and I will be the moderator for the plenary session today. As mentioned, Embrio Enhancing Marine Biodiversity Research in Indonesia is a network initiative initiated by the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Sciences, IPB, in 2013 to promote scientific innovations based on marine biodiversity resources and to strengthen counteractions against marine biodiversity loss. Embrio aims to grow into an Indonesia-wide network with strategic international partners and a center of excellence in Indonesia marine biodiversity research. On the behalf of the organizers, Embrio International Workshop and Embrio Committee, we wish to extend our warm welcome and thank you to all participants, guest honors, delegates, and foreign and local participants to this 4th Embrio International Workshop in Bogor, Indonesia through virtual Zoom. Today, we have about 100 participants and 3 outstanding speakers, marine biodiversity experts, academicians, and also students joining these international workshops. And the participants come together here to present and to learn how to improve their manuscript. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Andreas Lopata to deliver his plenary speech. Professor Andreas Lopata leads the Molecular Allergy Research Laboratory in the College of Public Health, Medical and Veterinary Sciences Division of Tropical Health and Medicines, James Cook University, Australia, where he leads the Molecular Immunology program in the Center for Molecular Therapeutics. Professor Lopata graduated in Biological Sciences from the Heinrich Heine University of Düsseldorf, Germany, and undertook postgraduate studies at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, where he completed his doctorate and worked in the Institute for Infectious Disease and Molecular Medicines. His research focused on the molecular characterizations of allergens and their impact on our immune system. In 2006, he moved to Australia, where he works now as a researcher at the James Cook University. Professor Lopata has more than 28 years experience in the molecular immunological analysis of food allergens for better diagnostics and development of therapeutics specific to the Australian Asian regions. So today we have him today with us. He will be sharing with us about writing an effective manuscript in editor's perspective. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Andreas Lopata. Time is yours, folks.
Yes, I wish you thanks very much, firstly, to the 4th Embrio International Workshop for the invitation and for the panel members to invite me. I'm very happy and delighted to be able to talk. And I know quite a few of your panel members, Dr. Nograha quite well. He spent a few years in James Cook University working with us, and I'm happy to see quite a few of you have been also in Germany in the past and got your PhD. I think Havis and Mala also many years ago. So yes, it's fantastic to link up, and the same as me, I left Germany 25 years ago via South Africa, now up in the tropics in North Queensland. And our research is very much focused on marine biodiversity, more on a molecular level, and we're looking at the impact on immune systems. And because our work is very much in the interface between marine science and immunology and human health, I'm a co-editor and on the editorial board of quite a few different journals, from allergy journals right down to immunology journals and the World Allergy Organization also. So I've come across a lot of publications myself, of course, making a lot of mistakes, and one learns over, as we had over 20 years in the science, how not to repeat mistakes in writing papers and getting rejection and trying to get in the best journal possible. It's not rocket science, but it is science. And it's sometimes harder than one believes. But I hope I put something nice together for you that you can see the common mistakes and the best approaches, I would say, of getting successfully a grant, a publication in a best journal possible. So I'll try to share now my screen. So let's yeah, that's not yet. Yep. All right. So you see all my screen? Yeah, good. Just try and get my pointer up. So, all right. So, so basically, starting off, what are reviewers looking for? So we will come to this at the end, of course, again. But the importance of the hypothesis, original research, clear progressions through the paper, so clearly writing and well presented. So these are 4 kind of simple points one has to keep in mind, and I'll show you a little bit later how one can really address it and what one has to look for. But basically on the graph like this, novelty versus technical quality, ideally you sit here in the top right quadrant, you know, having everything ticked like this. And I think often research is very good and it's very original, but the writer often kind of is not able to translate this properly into a writing context. So, and that's basically when you look at these, and I have a lot of this data from different journals, how they would like authors looking at their own work before they start submitting a paper, is looking at this balance. Are we ready? Is our work advanced, or is our work a little bit outdated? Incorrect conclusion, of course, or duplication of work which has been done already by others. So, and often we sit there with also with work from students, PhD students, master students being in the lab and often not completed. I mean, I've been on the same side many times myself and will be probably in the future also. But how do we deal with this? How can we still get a decent publication out of this? And there it starts also looking at the types of journals. So what makes a strong manuscript in general is clear, useful, exciting message. And the abstract is perfect for this. Of course, the letter to the editor is the first engagement where you try to tell the editor, here, this is actually a good article, and it should not be rejected straight away, but at least sent around to the reviewers. So clear, useful, exciting, logical manner construction, and you should also talk about the significance. So editors, reviewers, and the readers, of course, at the end of the day, people who want to read the scientific work in the field, they all want to receive a well-presented manuscript, not with too many technical errors or look very concise, at least at the beginning. So what types of articles do we have? I mean, there's not only full articles. We always think about that it has to be a full paper with 10 or 20 figures and tables, but you can actually talk also about letters and short communications. Sometimes it's only because the work should go out very quickly. If you have really exciting news, you should definitely think about a short communication letter. But on the other hand, also if you have very good data, your student left and you know you cannot continue this work as deep as you wanted, you still should be able to get a short communication out of it, because often the research is still novel and quite exciting. And then, of course, you have review papers. Also there, is it a new topic, or is it something which has been done already every 3-4 years? Somebody writes a very similar review, or is it really a timely review, but it hasn't been done for the last 10 or 15 years? Particularly in the marine environment, marine biodiversity, or utilization of marine components for food, but also for health. There's a lot of activities happening in the last 5 to 10 years, and increasingly more and more. So what type of article? How do I choose the right journal? Very important. So before we start even writing a paper, is the first thing we in the group and with collaborators think about: what do we target? Which journal? What is the audience? Do we have a technical paper, or is it really more a message paper? Choose only one journal at the end. Have a couple of candidate journals, a handful of these shortlisted between your collaborators and your students, but then focus on one journal and write only for one journal, and not simultaneously maybe for 2 different types of journal, which are quite different. Investigate the journal shortlist, aims and scope of the journal. If you have never published there before, look what the aims and scope actually are. Does my work really fit in there? Then the type of article, as I just mentioned, who will read it? Is it an open access journal you want to target, but of course you want more people actually read the article, or is it just a normal subscription? Speed of publication. How long does it take you? You know, you submit, you take a long time to write it and do the data, you submit it, and it takes 3 months before you get even a reply. This happens more and more because there's a lot of journals out there, and it's a huge amount of papers are submitted every year. So what do you think what the rejection rate is of articles? Now, the good journals, the top ranking in any field, so the top 3 or 4 journals, they will reject 80 to 90% of all articles they get. So that's the true reality of this. And other journals, maybe 50%. So there's a high chance that it gets rejected. So be very specific, because you don't want to delay the publication of research too much. Impact factor, does it count? Yes, of course, we're all looking for a high impact factor, but also we're looking at citation numbers. Now, I'll show you right at the end, there are some journals which are highly cited, and they have an impact factor of 4 or 5. And so not super high, like Nature maybe has 40. So just target the journal. High impact factor journals are very difficult to get in, but is it worthwhile for the research I want to do, or the grant I want to get? Or do you want to get a few papers for your students before they're trying to get a postdoc position, which is important. So there's a balance between impact factor and other journals which are actually highly cited. So the first thing, go to the website, look for guide of authors. So while this is a kind of obvious thing, it's in my perspective wrong to write the paper and spend 2 months writing it with different collaborators, and then you look at the guide for authors and realize, oh, my article is actually 3 times as long as I have only space for words. Often these journals have only 2, 3 or 4,000 word limits, and you're writing 8,000 words. And then you have to start cutting down, which costs you again a lot of time. So right at the beginning, have a look at the journal you want to target, look at the guide for authors, and it saves a lot of time at the end. Right from the beginning, more or less stick to the guidelines. Authorship, it seems kind of logical, but often also people who are involved in basic ideas in the lab work or helped with certain mathematical or statistical calculation, you should think to keep them straight on board right from the beginning and have them involved in authorship, not right at the end when you write it and say, oh, by the way, you're author and we're submitting tomorrow morning, is it okay? So that's also not great. So try right from the beginning, involve everybody, think about everybody who can or should be involved. So now you start preparing a manuscript, choose the authors we have said, hopefully the right journal, don't aim too high, don't aim too low either. There's more than the journal impact factor, as I said, look at the web page and use the correct format. That's the numbers of figures, the numbers of tables, the font size, and so on. Simple things like this, have them on there right from the beginning. Don't try at the end to remodulate it in the target journal you want to go. And then there's this abbreviation IMRAD, writing a paper, introduction, method, result, and discussion or conclusion. That is IMRAD, introduction, method, results, and discussion. So that's kind of the major structure of any journal. But what should be covered in the introduction? I mean, that's often I see this when you have students from a PhD writing the first paper, have this very, very long introduction. And it's so long, that's part of course, chapter 1 of the thesis or chapter 2 of the thesis. And it's very clearly to see. So write 1 or 2 pages. Why ask this research question? Yeah. What does this research question address? And in the method, what did I do? The results section would cover what did I find? Very simple question. And in the discussion, what does it mean or what might it mean? So some speculation based, of course, on science and your own published previous work and others. So why, what, and what did I find and what does it say? That is in a nutshell what should be covered. So the structure, of course, is a little bit more complex. Title, abstract, keywords. So these 3 things, while they are kind of often done at the end of an article when you write this, they're the first ones where people look for in a journal, for a journal article. So if you want to get high citations, and that's what a journal wants to increase the impact factor. So that's always the thing. Yes, of course, the journal is the mediator between the author and the reader. But at the end of the day, the journal wants to increase the impact factor as much as possible. That's why 80%, 90% rejection factor are with very high impact journals, because they get the impact because of the high citations. So title has to be catchy, and I'll show you how. Abstract has to be well structured and tell you the whole story and what it means, and choosing the right keywords. Simple things like this. We often also do this right at the end, you jot down a couple of keywords, but when people look for articles in a particular research, you should have really appropriate keywords to get the high citation for yourself. And the journal will also like this, of course. So search and find here in orange. Then comes the main body, introduction, method, results, and discussion. So you tell your story, and then you provide context of your story. So what does it all mean? And there's a conclusion coming in. At the end of your discussion, you have basically in a nutshell what you discovered and what it means, without repeating your discussion again. Acknowledgement, who was all involved, who sponsored the research, where does the money come from? Is it a government? Is it international collaboration? References, of course, they have to be up to date. If you have a 2020 journal submission, you have to have references of 2020. Otherwise, you will be definitely not updated. And maybe supporting material. Appendices, you can have more figures, more tables to show more data. Not everything has to go in the main body. And I see this more and more. Medium ranked journals or the not super high journals have their 5 or 8 figures and tables, and then they have 20 appendices, 20 tables and figures attached to it as an appendix. And this nowadays is almost kind of normal. So you show all the data you have. You don't be skimpy and show only a little bit. So you can have a lot of data in the main text to support your research. So if you have it, you show it. So now how do we start with the process of building this? And I'll show you on the right side the two arrows. So traditionally it goes up and down. You build it up, starting off, you make the figure and tables because that's your data. Yeah, what's the next thing? Then you write the method. Also straightforward, shouldn't be too difficult. You know exactly what experiments you did to get these figures and tables done. What's the method? So the next thing is the results. Discussion, then building on, once you have method and results in your figures, you can start the discussion and the conclusion. And then at the end, you build the introduction to your research, title, abstract, and keywords. So often you build down from the bottom up, starting off with the figure and tables. At the end, you do the title, you do the abstract, and you do the keywords based on your research. So I do it often the other way around. I start also not necessarily with keywords, but with the title and abstract. I definitely want to discuss with the authors what's the title of the article, what do we want to do? Yeah, we want to say in an abstract summarizing our finding. I think it's very important when you write the paper that you already have the idea what the method should be in a title and what should be the abstract summarizing before you write the discussion. Because the discussion is very much focused to support your title and support your abstract. And then the introduction, at the end, you can write the introduction. That's definitely the introduction and conclusion, what one should probably write at the end, once you have all the data there and you know what the message is supposed to be. Right? So we're going now through a couple of different sections. They give you some hints, starting off with the title. I mean, and as I said, we often start with the title because the story is, so what is the message? And you should do your experiments and your research already around this, the title. Oh, sorry, I have to go back and say what is the message of this publication. So I have to try to get these away here. Nope. So the title can be used in different scientific papers, and that can be, when you have a look here in red, I have the same title or the same kind of meaning. Here, the effectiveness of bed nets in controlling mosquitoes at different seasons of the year. Yeah? And this is basically called an indicative title. No indication of any results obtained or the conclusion drawn. This just basically tells you what you have done. It's not very exciting. So having this as a journal, if somebody reads it, it's not very exciting. So next one is the same title, the same meaning is now when you convert this into an informative title. Bed nets control mosquitoes most effectively when used in a rainy season. So you already know what the research outcome is, not only what you studied, but also what you come out. And now you, as a reader, I'm excited and say, oh, great, I want to have a look at this and why it's not so great maybe in a dry season or in different periods, the beginning of the rain season, at the end, and how did they do the research? Whereas on the top, there could be a lot of ways of researching this, and I might be not interested in not even start reading it. You can also convert this into a question type title. When are bed nets most effective when used to control mosquitoes? And here the answer would be in the rainy season. So you could convert it into this, or have right at the bottom a kind of main subtitle or series type of title where you say effective bed nets on mosquitoes. Number one, the effectiveness when used only in the rainy season. So this is the title which editors like the least, I will say. And that's the reason for this. If this article gets submitted, there is a kind of almost duty there that authors would expect that if you want to publish part 2 and part 3 of this, that their duty on the editor is to accept these also. And that should be not the case. So that's, choose one of them. Usually the informative title is probably the best one, because this makes people stop when they're looking on the website and say, oh, that's an interesting research. Let's have a look a little bit further if I want to download the whole article and read it. So the title should identify the main issue of the paper, should be concise, of course, accurate, specific, complete, professional language. So short, catchy titles are often better cited. That's also something which statistics has shown. If you have titles which are rather short, rather than a long sentence which you have to read twice or 3 times before you understand it, it's not as good. Some examples here. On the left side, original title, Action of Antibiotics on Bacteria. Well, that could be anything, absolutely anything. So that is a kind of non-informative title, and you can revise this to something much more tangible. Inhibition of growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis by streptomycin. So you know what bacteria is studied, you study the inhibition of growth, and which particular substance you're looking at, which is streptomycin. So you have everything in the title. And if I'm working in any of this field, I will go straight down and read more. Another example here, preliminary observation on the effect of zinc element on anti-corrosion and zinc plating layer. Again, it's a very descriptive title and doesn't tell you anything what actually happened. And you can convert this to make it shorter and more punchy, like effect of zinc on anti-corrosion of zinc plating layer. So already there's a message out there. And by purpose, I didn't want to bring anything in marine or marine biology or zoology science in to show you just how to stick just to the strategy rather than a particular topic. Keywords is the next one, the third one where people look and search for are basically the labels of the manuscript. When people do a search, they're looking for these keywords, or the software looks for keywords actually for you. So you might miss actually very interesting articles which you like to read and cite even, but you don't find them if the keywords are not used. So the use for indexing should be specific. And here an article, blade wake interactions and cross-flow turbines. On the right side, you see a whole range of different keywords used. And what you also see is these keywords are often actually quite good if they are combination of words and not single words like turbine, or cross-flow. So they use cross-flow turbine in a matter of speaking. Fluid structure interaction, high order discontinuous galerkin, or sliding meshes. So using terminologies together, and it's search engines easier find these keywords, because once you submit the paper, no reviewer or editor will look at the keywords. So that's usually something that you never get feedback, but it's super important for you or for your career to get high citations by choosing the best keywords. So that's also something I had to learn over years. Nobody told me this, but that's really very important. So in the check also the guide for authors or any specific guidance, usually it's limited to 4, 5, 6 keywords. So you can't have a huge range of keywords, so you have to be fairly specific. Abstract. Now we're getting really to the abstract. As I said, I like to write it first. Other people write at the end once you got your data out, but you should do your research actually with the end in mind. You should have a rough idea already what you want to show, and not necessarily depending on your research outcomes completely. So you have to have a hypothesis. So keep it brief as possible. Usually 200-300 words is anyway a word limit. Most of these articles, some journals don't have a word limit. Recommendation is still keep it brief, still make it 200-300 words, because otherwise people stop reading and don't read the rest of the journal. Summarize the problem, methods, results, and conclusion. And I'll show you just now a very nice structure on this. Make sure it's clearly written, mainly make sure it's easy to understand. Don't make long sentences. Make short, punchy sentences with information. Make sure it's accurate and specific while it's being catchy. And there is this, follow the rule of 10. So just keep this in mind for any of your papers you write in the future. 10 should be the kind of plus minus the line limit, or the sentence limit, not lines, the sentence limit. So I have 1 or 2 sentences for the aim. Not too long, not too short. 2 to 3 sentences material and method. How did you do it? 2 to 3 sentences results, and then it's just the main results. You might have a lot of different results, but just show the major findings. Because these major findings, you have only 2 sentences for discussion and conclusion. You found this and this is what it means. Now you have to really spell it out. You can't expect that the reader knows automatically what you did and what it actually means. You have to spell it out. So follow the rule of 10 sentences. So that's a nice structure. I only found recently how, or if you want to submit a paper to Nature, which we of course all want to do at least once in our lifetime as a scientist, and get it also accepted. The first thing what you write to them, here's on the right side what you see, this is a kind of summary of your research. It's almost like kind of an abstract. That's why I want to show you this together with abstract writing, and shows you how punchy it is and how little sentences you only spend and how you structure it. So the first 1 or 2 sentences provide a basic introduction to the field. And what is this field? Is it food allergy? Is it fish? Is it shellfish? Are the mollusks you're working on? And then 2 or 3 sentences, a little bit more detailed background on what they are. Shellfish are subdivided into mollusks and crustaceans. And 1 sentence now, problem statement. However, this and this and this has not been done, or it's not unknown, or it's unclear. So you already introduce now what your research is. So then you summarize the main results of your findings straight away. Problem statement in 1 sentence, and 1 sentence. Here we show that this and this is this and this. You immediately give the question, hypothesis, and you give straight the answer of your research. And then you go in detail the main results. We found this and this and this and this and this. Similar like an abstract, a little bit longer in this summary paragraph, but a very similar structure overall. Then you put the results in a context. Again, 1 or 2 sentences only. Our results demonstrate. And while this seems to be a little bit repetitive, it's really much easier reading as a reviewer and also as a reader, just to say our results show, or we show, or we demonstrate in the study this and this. And then you know the following sentence or 2 summarizes what you found. And then at the end, a couple of sentences, only 2 or 3, we anticipate our essay will be doing this and this. Or they anticipate our finding now will change the view of certain species are actually not just mollusks and just not crustaceans. Maybe they are missing link between different taxonomy. Or we found that this and this now food supply of this unknown species now really has an impact on future development of aquaculture or something. So you put everything of your findings into context after providing a very structured paragraph, and this is really nicely shown in the different colors. So really great, and that was provided by Nature themselves. If you want to approach them, you have to give them a summary of this paragraph first, and then they will invite you to submit your article or not. So that's how it goes with these guys. Introduction. Again, what you do there, you explain the problem, describe your approach, how you want to investigate these things, and you mention also existing solutions and limitations. And it gives you an example. Here, the introduction, I highlighted a little bit in yellow here, certain areas where you give really broad background, then more detailed background, and then really in the topic of your problem and questions you're addressing. So, and then at the end, you kind of summarize basically in a present study, we did this and this. You summarize what you did, how you tried to, which approach you used to answer the problem or generate more knowledge around this problem. So why is the study done? Basically, a couple of things in red. And what is the objective of the study? Mention also previous studies. You can bring in this and this has been done previously, but don't go overboard. Don't make it too long. The limited introduction to studies that relate directly to the present study. I mean, that's, as I said, if you write papers with students, they like to get your whole literature review in there in the background. You have to really tone it down and just stick to which is important for problem statement and what you did you address. And emphasize your specific contribution to the topic. If you have published there before in this area, or colleagues from your university, put it in there, because people want to see here they have already published in this space and now they will do more work on this. Don't think you don't do this because it's your own work. It's very important that the reader and the reviewer and the editor sees that you already work in this field and you just contributing more information. Yeah, and the last integration, last sentence gives information about what you found and what your hypothesis was. And then this is the introduction straight into the method. How did you do this? What approaches did you use on the technical level? And this is now the methods. You describe how, detailed information. If there's certain citation, if you refer to your own previous work, you explained it or others, put a citation in so you don't have to repeat everything. But equipment material, simple things like this, chemical formulas are often missing in papers that talk about the application of a certain chemical in an experiment, but never actually show what they're talking about, and present also controls. Basically, everybody who wants to repeat this research, this method section should allow them to go back and repeat the research. There should not be major gaps. And often controls, that's one of the gaps. People think they're not important, but they're very important to understand the outcomes of the experiments. Yeah? So always present also the controls. Yeah, these are the steps, narrative to the steps you take in your experiment. Not a list of instructions, so it's not a cookbook by itself, but it should be easy. If there is more detail needed, you can refer to a very specific paper where this has been done. So stick to it and don't make it too long. Remember, if there's only 2 or 3 or 4,000 word limit for the overall manuscript, don't use half of it for the method section. This would be not appropriate. So now we come to the result. Now, of course, that's great. So before you do the result sections, you have to make the figures. Make the figures, make the tables. That's your data. And now you go into the data. Only include data of primary importance. The main finding, unexpected finding. Use supplementary data. As I said, now people use it a lot. So you can have several figures and tables supplementary. You know they're important for somebody who knows the stuff better and wants to see the actual values. This comes in a supplementary file. The main body, just keep the main messages, how you work them from 1, 2, 3, and 4 up to the last finding. Use definitely subheadings to keep the results in the same together, the same type, and avoid redundancies. And subheadings should usually flow with the methods. So if you have 5 different methods, you should have 5 different results for each of these methods. So to simplify it. So you should not have a method explained right at the end in your method section, and this is the first result you discuss. And this would not be appropriate, and the reader would get confused and look at the different sections. So try to do it kind of more or less parallel if possible. So use tables and figures efficiency. Again, that sounds obvious, but it's not often the case, and provide statistical analysis. Do you have a mean? You have repetitions, you have a standard deviations, you have a standard error of mean. You must exactly explain in these figures what you have done. And in the method section, you should also already refer to what type of statistical approach you utilized. So very important is it does not attempt to interpret the data. So, or the meaning of the data. And just purely present what you see. If there's an increase, is a decrease, is it statistically significant increase or decrease or not? Is there a trend? Anything around this, but don't do this is because this and this. And this absolutely has nothing to do in the results section and has to go into discussion. Summarize the data with text, tables, and figures. That's what you say. You say, here, there's a trend from there. You don't just repeat the same data, what you see in the figure and table. That's the redundancy. But rather say there's an increase, a decrease, it's significant or not, or but not interpretation, the reason for this data. Yeah? Don't attempt to evaluate, report only what you have found and what you see. All the rest goes into the discussion section. Now also visualization in results, sorry, also very important. Maximize visual versus space. If you have a nice, on the right side here, you see this diagram with the X and Y axis. everything should be self-explanatory, very important. This has to be freestanding. All the items you use, the colors, the shadings, the symbols, everything has to be in there. Sometimes, yes, you can put it in a legend, but the legend must then be also very informative. Use everything there, and everything has to be self-explanatory, and color only when it's necessary. And you see on the right side a fairly complex figure does not need a color. It doesn't need red, green, and blue. It's just different shades of grays. Yeah, we know at least 50 out there. So graphs should be uncrowded plots, restricted data set, just use the correct scales and axis labels so you have a nice filled out figure. If you have photos, like here you see in the bottom, use a scale marker and don't manipulate the image to enhance the results. That's very important. Nowadays, with a lot of these figures and photos particularly, you have to show in the appendix, or a lot of journals have a separate download portal where you have to provide the original data of your figures, and not your figures, but your pictures and photos of histology or something. So they're getting very strict with this, because it happened too often now with these softwares, which are now fantastic. When I did my PhD, you didn't have this. I was writing my first reports with a typewriter. If I tell this my children nowadays, they don't even know what a typewriter is. So nowadays, our software technology is fantastic. You can do all manipulation, but of course, when it comes to these photos, you have to hold back, because they are really basically originals. Also tables, when do you make a table, when not? On the left side, you see sometimes really stuff like this, and you would say, man, it's as a reader impossible, and as a reviewer of this manuscript also, this needs a table, convert this in a table. On the other hand, here on the right side, you have very few data, virtually no data, and to make a complex table, yes, sometimes you want to do this for a thesis, for a student, that's fine. But for publication, they rather see that you convert this here with the arrow. I'll show you in the bottom. Growth medium aeration was essential for the growth of this bacterium. At room temperature, there was nothing, and only at higher temperature. So you can do this with a few lines in the text in the result sections, and you don't have to have a table. You have everything there. So that's like some examples. And after this, of course, you come to the discussion section. So here, yes, you have the interpretation of results. Most important section. Make the discussion correspondent to the results and complement, compare published data by other groups, and compare them with yours. What's different from yours? What's similar? Do you support or confirm what others have shown for something similar? Or here you find something very different? And do you think it was a problem? Is it the environment? Is it because the species you're investigating is slightly different, or the temperature, the one is cold climate, the other one is warm climate? Here there comes this interpretation of your data in, and highlighted in bold. This is the most important section, unfortunately. That's the most important section. All the rest is how to get to this discussion. Avoid statements that go beyond the results section, or the non-specific expression, new terms that are already defined to mention your paper, and don't have too much speculation. Interpretation, yes, and the kind of what's go beyond your research, but not speculations for something which is completely futuristic. So you have to stick really to what you showed and what others showed, and what it definitely means and what it could mean. Conclusion, right at the end you have, that's kind of in a nutshell, it's a separate paragraph. Nice, although for me as a reviewer, that's one of the first things I read. I read the abstract first. I don't read a paper in subsequence, and nobody does. Everybody has his own style, and the review does the same. You have the title, you have the abstract, and then I look at the figures, how the flows and the tables, and then I look at the conclusion section. So what it means, and then I start reading in detail. So explain how you work, advance the present state of knowledge. So it's this basically interpretation of all your discussion of data. Don't repeat results, and that's an abstract. That's very different, or this does not belong then in a conclusion. Discuss uses, extension of your findings, or application. What does it mean for aquaculture? What does it mean for future food supply? What does it mean for environmental impact on biodiversity? All of these things that comes to interpretation and a translation of findings, and potentially also future experiments. And we have to do no more different or smaller temperature scales, or we have to look also at salinity as a potential impact, and not only temperature and light cycle, what we did before. So it's not necessary that you identify a gap in your research, but you actually identify where it should go further. And that's people want to see this, because they want to see, they've done this and maybe we could do at something else. So be clear to help the reviewer and editor judge your work and its impact. And this is actually the conclusion, very important. So even before you start with the discussion, you can actually write this. And like in any paper, you write everything several times. So once you might think that's your conclusion, you write a discussion, at the end you read the conclusion and realize, hey, wait a minute, that's actually not completely true. And then you go back to the abstract and polish the abstract up and realize the abstract is actually also not really spot on, or it could be actually better. So the process of writing, what we started off, you build on the different building blocks, starting figure and tables, method, results, discussion, conclusion, and then the rest of it, and vice versa. As I said, the arrow goes both ways. So submitting a paper is unfortunately not just having a draft, giving it to your supervisor or your colleagues and see how it goes, because that's what happens. Draft 1, draft 2, and it's draft many times. So our papers, I would say, to be honest, they go also 5 to 10 drafts easy through, sometimes even longer. And then at the end, you're sick of reading it and reviewing it, and you just submit it because you just want to get it going. And there comes the timing in. If you leave it for too long, the paper, write it over a year, that doesn't really help. Make it rather in a shorter time frame if possible. And language review. At the end, get it maybe read by somebody who is has English as mother tongue. Myself, I'm not English as a mother tongue, so always get somebody reading it and getting their input, because that polishes just the last bits and pieces off before it goes to the editor and the reviewer, which are often English speaking, and they pick up very quickly odd sentences or phrases. So don't think that getting a paper published goes always through this hurdle. So we hope not. And that's the angst, the fear of people, it's like almost impossible, and everybody's waiting there to give you a smack on the way. But that's not the idea. There is actually a structure in this whole system. And when you look in the top, you are the author. Here in blue, you submit the paper. After all of the stuff we discussed right now, you're ready to submit the paper. And then it gets to the editor. And the first thing is they check basic requirements. Yeah, the number of figures, the number of tables, the word count. That's the first thing. And if they are not right, let's go straight to reject. They will send it back to you and say reject, revise it, and then we might consider it again. And then you have to restart it again. Don't be in this situation. It's not great. So if yes, then go straight to the review. They assign it. Often the editors, of course, they review it and might reject it if they say, that doesn't really fit in our aims and scopes. It's out of place. Or the editor, usually it happens there already, but once I think it's okay, then it goes to reviewers. Reviewers will read it using the different guidelines I told you. They will evaluate the paper based on this and give recommendations back to the editor. So they collect reviewers, usually 2 or more, 2, 3, or 4. The reality, and I don't know if you have done reviewing for journals, me as an editor, I have to ask many people before I get 2 reviewers actually committing to reading and evaluating a paper. So there are so many journals out there, and I get constantly asked by my own journals, of course, but also by other journals to read and review papers which are in my field. So there's a lot of rejection. That's why it often takes very long before your paper gets reviewed or even sent to reviewers, just to find somebody who's prepared to reviewing it. It's a mission by itself for editors. And if you suggest potential reviewers, it actually often goes faster. So that also helps. So they collect the reviewers' recommendation and then make a decision. They might say reject, or they might say major or minor revision, and then it goes back to revising it. So they will send it back, and you have to submit it again. Submit it again, and it goes through the same cycle. Sometimes the editor makes a decision directly and says, yeah, it's fine, it's publishable. Otherwise, it goes back to the same review, and they might then accept it, or they might ask for more revision. And so this cycle can go 2 or 3 times, usually not more than 3 times, but then the editor should make a decision of accepting it or rejecting it. So, but 2 to 3 divisions are possible. So again, coming back to the same thing, what did I look for? Importance of the hypothesis, original, is it original the work? And then of course, well presented and clear progression through the paper, that's what I showed you. But the first 2 points, that's something where you can make straight when you submit the paper. What is the first thing the editor does? He reads the cover letter. So that's your chance to speak directly to the guy and just don't put the title in. I just want to submit this paper here, look at this, and hopefully I get it accepted. So that's not very informative for the editor. So then they have to go back and then they have to read actually at least the abstract and fly over the thing before they assign co-editor. So you speak directly to the editor, tell them the main findings. So really keep it 1 page, but have 2 or 3 paragraphs talk about what the problem statement and what your main findings are. What is the motivation for your research and what's novel and important? And you found this and this, and that's not very important for this and this. Say also with 1 sentence, all authors have read the paper and they're happy for submission. State also if you have published in the same or other journals previous work, and this work is now building exactly on this. Last time we found this and this problem, and this time we actually identified the mechanism and can explain why we found this in the first place. So then people know what does the journal know? It gets better citations. People read the 1 paper, they will read also this paper because it explains now findings from the previous one. So you get more citations, which means for the journal, the impact factor goes up. And so you have to put a little bit the thinking cap on when you write a paper and covering letter, put yourself in the shoes of the journal and the editor. You can also suggest referees, but you can also state any conflict of interest. Your research was supported by a pharmaceutical company, for example. I mean, if you have just research funding, usually it's not really a problem, but for a pharmaceutical company, it could be. So the peer review, what about this? Now I showed you this picture for the guys with the different bets. These are all the different reviewers, but usually think about these guys that want to help you to improve the quality of the paper. Then they will check the quality, they validate it, they check if significance, if everything what you did research-wise was done with the correct controls and correct analysis. But ultimately, they want to improve the quality of the paper. And I, as an editor, want the reviewer to improve this journal, to make this article better than it was sent in before. Publishers usually see themselves as being outside and not biased, and they're just there to facilitate the review process. So these are the publishing houses. So consider them as an ally, treat them seriously. When you get response, and I'll show you just now, answer them 1 by 1. Have them repeat it, what they said, and then you answer underneath. So some of our rebuttals, what we call them, it's sometimes 5, 10, sometimes even 20 pages long is your rebuttal, where you address each single comment of the reviewers. And at first you write the comment and then you write in detail your answer. And if you change something in the text, you copy the whole text section in your reply and say where you changed what. So it makes it much easier for the editor to quickly go through it and say, okay, this was changed and that's in the text. I don't have to go in the text and actually find it. It's already there and I'm happy with this. Deal with each and every point. Do not have to agree with all of them and say, thanks very much, but we can't change this because the experiment is conducted and we don't have more samples. But tell them, don't just ignore this. You can make also additional changes. If you change something, according to the review and realize, this other section actually in introduction and discussion should also be revised based on this different approach. Say this, we changed also this and we changed this accordingly to match holistic in the whole manuscript. And that's great. Then I see as an editor that the authors really want to improve the quality of the overall paper. And then don't be unhappy and try to guess who the referee was. You get a bad response and I say, this must be this guy. He always doesn't like my research, so he probably wrote very badly about me. So often you are completely wrong. So don't do this and be cautious to the referees and editors in general. And I have a couple here of typical comments. Hope you can read them. The quality is not great. So typical on the left side, the review comment is the method, device, paradigm of the authors proposed is clearly wrong. I mean, how do you answer this? I mean, it's like nothing you can improve. You can rewrite your paper. So how you should not respond is, yes, we know, or we thought we could still get a paper out of it. Sorry for that. So that's would be not a good answer. Yeah? Or here, the reviewer says, authors failed to reference this and this particular work. They did this already 20 years ago and you repeat this. You should say, we didn't think anybody would read this old work. Yes, their work was actually better than ours. That's not a good answer either. Or on the right side, this paper is poorly written and scientific unsound. I do not recommend it for publication. Now, one thing I must tell you, as a reviewer, and you are not allowed actually to make any comments about this paper should be accepted or shouldn't be accepted in your reply to the authors. So if you see this, and if I see this as a reviewer, I would not consider this whole review authentic and well-sounded, because you should not make these kind of statement. That is to the editor to make the final statement, we accept this paper or not, because this reviewer has no idea what the other reviewers say. And so all 2 or 3 or 4 reviewers are very independent. And of course, you should not get really upset. And I have seen things like this. You reviewer, I know who you are. I'm going to get you when it's my turn to review your paper. So these things happen. People write this. So what are alternatives? On the left side, where he says there's clearly wrong the method applied, you can say here the reviewer raised an interesting concern. However, as the focus of this work is exploratory and not performance-based, validation was not found to be of critical importance. So if because remember, this goes at first to the editor. The editor will look at these correspondence, what the reviewer said and what you say. And then he decides, I'm okay with this. It doesn't have to go back to the reviewer. Or if you have a very short or scrumpy or unhappy response, they might just say, okay, let's send it back to the reviewer and let's them decide it. So, and then it's usually not in your corner. Then it's not very good for you. So be really helpful to the editor to make a good response. So here also you can say, however, our work is based completely on different principle than the other one. It looks the same, but we use a different technique. We use a different approach. We use different timelines. So you can easily explain what's really different between this 20-year-old work and yours. You're using complete different technologies, which is much more sensitive. So you might see different patterns. And in the very right side, where the guy says it's poorly written and scientifically unsound, you say the reviewer raises an interesting concern. Be friendly. However, we feel a reviewer did not fully comprehend the scope of this work, missed such results based on incorrect assumptions. So you are firm and saying here what we have done is 100% correct. And we are sorry that he doesn't understand this, but we think what we provided, the data, are sufficient. I mean, we have done 2 or 3 revisions of papers where the reviewer came back always for the same things, and we tried to review it. At the end, we still got it accepted because the editor realized our reply was as honest as possible. So keep this in mind, really, the review process, and really detailed, spend pages and pages writing reply and be friendly to the author, to the editor, as well as the reviewer. So make sure the message is clear in the abstract and not just in the cover letter, also in the paper. Communicate clearly and promptly, And if you need more information, as I said, I have a lot of this information from different websites, but Elsevier and BMG Journals have some nice PowerPoints up and showing the same thing what I tried to combine from various different angles to get a paper published in an as high as possible impact factor. Yeah, thanks very much. I hope it was not too long and too long-winded, but getting a good paper published takes anyway a lot of time. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Lopata. So it's really insightful for preparing our manuscript. So we know that the first gate that we have to enter is the editor. So
Yep.
the journal editors really want to publish really good quality science that is interest to their readers because they want to improve their journal. So
Yes.
our submission is more like is accepted if it's within the scope of the journal, or is there any novelties or describe research that advance the field. So as us as a author, we have to make editors see the significance of the manuscript, make them easy to understand the value of the manuscript, and make them feel happy to read our manuscript. So thank you very much for raising up very important of the editor's perspective. So now I would like to invite the audience to raise their questions. You can use Q&A features in your Zoom room, or you can raise your hand. So we have one attendees who raised a hand. Nirmala Idjaya, please host to unmute her to give a questions. So please, Nirmala, sorry. Mas Yoga, can you handle the mute of Nirmala Sari Ida Wijaya?
Pak Dwi bisa meng-unmute?
Harus di-mute dari sana, Bu. Tapi sudah bisa bicara ya.
Silahkan Bu Nirmala di-unmute. Can you please unmute yourself?
So Bu Nirmala, you can unmute yourself now.
Maybe just accidentally raise hand, maybe.
Okay. Oh.
Somebody asked about the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, I can send this to you, and you can distribute it later to people who would like a copy. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, I send it as a PowerPoint, as a PDF. Yeah.
Okay, please, anyone who wants to give questions, please write it down in Q&A. But since we are running out the time because of the technical problem at the beginning, are you joining us here until at the end of the sessions, or you will leave us?
Yeah, myself, yeah, will on and off. I will be out for an hour, but then I'm back again.
Okay.
Yeah, for an hour I have to go back to the breaks.
The questions, if there is some questions to you later, because
we can do later.
So we have to continue until you come back. Then I will ask some questions if there is related to you.
Fantastic. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Andreas Lopata. So on the behalf of the organizers, Embrio, we wish to extend our thank you to you, Professor Lopata, for your time and knowledge. So we would like to handing over the certificate of as a plenary speakers. Can you please show the certificate?
Sarin.
Mas Sarin.
Sertifikatnya.
So thank you very much, Professor Andreas Lopata from the James Cook University for joining us as a plenary speaker. So we are hoping that from your presentations that will advance our knowledge to preparing our manuscripts. So without further ado, I would like to continue with the second sessions of the plenary. I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Mala Nuril Mala to deliver her plenary speech. So Professor Mala Nuril Mala is a lecturer at the Department of Aquatic Products Technology, IPB University. She completed her bachelor and master programs at the IPB University. She obtained the best graduate predicate as a graduate of the IPB University when she earned master degree here in IPB. Her doctoral degree was obtained in the Tokyo University Todai in Japan in 2013 at the Aquatic Bioscience Department, Laboratory of Marine Biochemistry. The fields of biomolecular and biochemistry, especially those related to protein, are areas that she is engaged in, including fish handling to improve fish quality and food safety. Topic of interest for research currently being carried out is fish handling to improve quality, DNA and protein from aquatic resources, which are very useful, including the development of markers and DNA barcoding for authentications and safety of seafood. Exploration of aquatic products, especially protein-based, including collagen, gelatin, and their derivatives, which are needed for both for food, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics, are also being developed by Professor Nuril Mala. Research collaborations have been and are being carried out, including with the Cornell University USA, Tokyo University, and Tohoku University of Japan. She is active in writing books, national and international journals, and she is the editor of MPSPI journal. She has the motto, do your best and always ganbate, strive hard with patience in any case. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Mala Nuril Mala. She will be sharing with us about writing a scientific article for international journals. So time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Hawis, for introducing me. So hello, Professor Andreas. So we are can meet here. So okay, Pak Hawis, may I share my slide?
Please.
Okay. Okay, I will try to share my slide. So first of all, I would like to thank for Embrio team inviting me to share my experiences, and I'm trying to compile with another sources, for example, from many websites. So here we will focus on the writing a scientific paper for international journal. So Professor Andreas already explained to us from the editor's perspective. So in our topic here, I will try to share in our experience from the author's sides. So there are so many scientific writings, such as research article or research paper that we will focus today. Another scientific writing, such as short communication article. So this is like the paper that you want to inform soon your finding. For example, if you found a new method or maybe like the primary structure and you want to publish now, then you can use the short communication article. Another scientific writing, review article. Review article called is the literature review. So it means it summarized from previously published studies, and it like the author has the expertise in that topic when the author want to publish the review article. So another scientific writing is research report. It is like the report when you get the funding and then you have to report to the funding agent. Maybe another scientific rating, right? The research project or funding. Maybe I think maybe James Bell will discuss more with this topic. Another patents or dissertation or test of or thesis. So there are many reasons why the authors want to publish. For example, getting PhD degree, for getting funding or getting promotion, or another reasons, maybe like sharing your work, or maybe you wanna say something important, or maybe you want to get the information you want to publish in the high impact journal, or maybe keep your job. So many reasons, but editors or reviewer doesn't mind with your reason. They just want to see how is your manuscript. Is it the strong manuscript, as Andrea said in the previously? So we have to prepare our manuscript in the strong manuscript. So what is the strong manuscript? Strong manuscript, it like they have the good content, so they have the novelties or useful and exciting when the reader try to explore or read the papers. And then don't forget the strong manuscript, they have to show the good presentation. So the reader can catch up the idea of the what the author want to say in the manuscript. With the strong manuscript, so reviewer and editors can understand your work or your idea very easy. So here I'm trying to share my experience, the steps of publication. So I agree, as Andrea said, that please choose the journal, only decide one of journal. Don't submit to multiple journals. So focus on the journal. And the important thing, the authors, we have to carefully read the instruction or general guidance. So this is the first of the important thing for the author when he or she want to submit to the journal. Why? Because each journal has their own style. So for example, here I can show this year I already published in the Marine Drugs. So when you choose the journal, you have to read very carefully. For example, is it open access or closed? If open access, so you need maybe more money to publish in this journal. After that, you can see, is there any templates here? If there is a template, so you have to use the template as the journal give the information. After that, you are ready to publish. Another one, I also already published in the fisheries science. This is a journal in Japan. So maybe you can you can see the differentiation with the marine drugs. Marine drugs, the impact factor is very high. So what do you want to publish? If you want to publish in the highest impact factor, so you can also read very carefully, and then you can see, is it any specific requirement, something like that. This is another sample for fishery science. Fishery science, as you can see, the impact factor is not so high. But in Japan, here is #1 for Japanese people. They like to submit in the fishery science. Even the impact factor is not high, so high, but this is the top in the Japanese people for journal. You can see here, there is choices, open access or closed access. So you can choose which one. You can decide you want to choose the open access or you want to choose the closed access. So in the website also, the journal give the information to us, the impact factor, or also the how many days for the submission, and also what is the scope, and also the guidance for the authors, and then see the submit the manuscript. You can see one by one. So here maybe I repeated the Andreas explanation, but from the author's sides. So generally, parts of the manuscript, they consist title, abstract. So title, abstract is very important because the reader, usually they use the title or keywords when they are searching in the journal. Another one, Imrat, as Andrea said, introduction, method, result, and discussion. So this is the body text in the journal. For example, here is the body text, including introduction, method, result, and discussion. So here, for example, why or what is the strategy? What is the strategy when we choose the title? So the important thing, the title is the backbone of an article. Title indicates content or main discoveries and attracts the reader attention. It decides whether article is worth reading or will get attention of the reader. So the title must be attractive and catchy title. Don't forget to the journal instruction. I just want to show you, maybe this is the good title for the journal. It says novel multiplex PCR RFLP assay discriminates bovine, porcine, and fish gelatin substitution in Asian pharmaceutical capsule cell. So it is very clear what is the finding, what is the focus on this title. But the bad title, the example just bovine, porcine, and fish gelatin differentiation. There is no idea what is the new finding and what is the topic that the author want to share to other readers. After we determine the title, we go to the abstract. Abstract is the most critical part of the paper. Abstract can stand alone. Usually the readers, when they want to they want to looking something in the website, so the reader will find the standalone of journal. So that's why the abstract should be informative, attractive, because the abstract reflects the main story of the article. In the abstract, we can involve many information, what you did, and what is the important thing. Paragraph usually consists 150 or 30 words, and there is no references in the abstract. Remember, for the detailed information, not in the abstract, but in the body text. So here I can give the sample that abstract should be standalone. So for example here, this is my abstract. This is gelatin and collagen, and then the activities of the antioxidant. So this is in the introduction, the short briefly explain what is the gelatin or what is the important thing to utilize the skin waste. And then after that, it informed to us the objective of the research. And then we can also give the briefly methods here and a result here, and finally conclusion. Now we are going to the body text. Body text, maybe if you can imagine, like the funnels. So what is the funnels? Like we will share to the readers the general information first. what is the problem, and is there any existing solution in that problem, and which one is the best one? Is there any limitation? And with our research, is there any improvement to contribute to this topic? That's why I like the figure like the funnel, general, and then specific. So introduction also can give the brief background for this topic to audience, and we have to inform the current study. Also, we have to focus what kind of the idea, what kind of topic that we want to inform to the audience, what kind of the idea we want to share to the audience. And then don't forget to update the literature citation. So for example, we want to publish this year to 2020. So we have to cite the new information in the 2020. And don't forget, should not be too long. And we can also summary the new finding. So for example, in the introduction, this is introduction. Many journals, as I said previously, they have own style. For example, in the fishery science, when we will inform in the introduction, and then we can see also the how to write the reference style. For example, here in the fishery science, the citation must be sold in the name and then the year. But for another journal, sometimes only for the numbering, not including the name of the authors. So here the introduction, you can see this is from general one, and after that I just show to the audience what is the capsule, what is the gelatin, and then how is the development of the research of gelatin nowadays. And then after that, I give the solution to the problem that it happened with the future. And then I also give the what is the objective of our research for this paper. Now we are going to discuss the material and methods. So material and methods like recipe. So we have to inform to the readers what is our method with the clearly. So it means the readers, they can repeat our work when they read our papers. And don't forget, in the material methods section, give references standard method. For example, if you use the general method from AUAC, so you cannot, no need to repeat one by one, step by step, but just you can include the general method in the previous research. And don't forget to write all of the chemical completely and must be identified. Usually when we write the chemical or apparatus, so it consists of the manufacturer name, address including city or country of the equipment or chemical that we use. And in the material and methods also, we inform to the audience for the statistical analysis and data collection. Sometimes we also involve the experimental details in the supplementary part. The next slide, we will discuss regarding the result. So result is the important section. So you will inform to the audience, what have you found? Sometimes result stand alone. Sometimes result combine result and discussion. So that's why don't forget to be carefully to read the guidance of the author, because sometime, not sometime, each journal, as I said, they have own styles. So if the result stand alone, so here you just give the information to the readers. What is the main finding? Maybe not to all, just main finding. What is the important thing in your paper or your manuscript? And also highlight finding that differ from findings in the previous paper or previous journal. And don't forget also, you can show to the readers the result of the statistical analysis that you use in the manuscript. In result and in the result also, it conclude the figure and tables. Don't forget to see what is the guidance of the author guidance lines. Sometimes they just give to the author maximum, for example, 5 table, 5 figure. So don't forget to see the rule of the author guidance. And the important thing also, the text in the photo or figure have to be clear and in the proper scale. And also you can see, it is you want to publish in the color paper, in the color page or no. It is also the important thing that you have to decide it. Okay, and as like the abstract, the figure and the table also can stand alone. So it means when the reader they saw our figure or our table, they can understand without anybody or any abstract. Okay, illustration are critical. Okay, it is like the caption. So in the figure and the table, we can see the caption or legend. It is also must be clear, so the reader can read and understand what the idea that you want to say to the authors. Don't forget, there is don't do duplication of the result described in text or other illustration. So for example, you want to say something in the same figure and then same table. So it is not a good manuscript. This is the example that the result is standalone here. And this is the sample result and discussion combined together. So depend on the style of the journal. Don't forget also to see what is the guidance for writing the table and writing the paper. Discussion. This is the result. What is the result mean? Here the section that you can sell your data. So many manuscripts they are rejected. They are rejected because the discussion is weak. Is not enough to answer the problem. So you have to check the following question. Is it the discussion related with the question that you have in the hypothesis in the introduction? And is it also consistent with other investigators? Or maybe is there any differences with other manuscript? So if they have the differentiation with the other manuscript, you can inform, you can discuss why your work is different with others. And in discussion also, you can give information what is the limitation in your manuscript. So in the discussion, you can, for example here, don't do write like suddenly you introduce new term or ideas. So it is very important to write the discussion. So in the discussion part, you are free to explain what the result mean or why they differ from what other workers have found. And in discussion also, you can suggest future direction for research, new method, explanation, or from previously published result. Actually, in my experience, the discussion is part of the hardest section to write. However, it is very important. So we have to give more time to write our discussion. Result may be easy to write, but discussion is very hard to do it. So in discussion, we have to answer the question in the introduction, and then what is the correlation you're finding with the existing knowledge. So other part is the conclusion. Conclusion, identify key findings and application. And please remember that conclusion should not be a summary of the work done or same or similar with the abstract. So it should be a little bit different with the abstract statement. And in the conclusion, you have to write inconsistent with experimental and introduction. Another part is the acknowledgement. It said the funding agencies or intellectual contribution or a dedication. And another section is the references. References, don't forget to cite the current and key references. References citation, again, must be accurate and complete. You can see in the guidance of the author. Read the references and use the correct style for the journal. So this is the sample in the fishery science. Actually, in the guidance for the author, there is no conclusion stated alone. But we can involve in our manuscript, for example, in the end of the manuscript before the acknowledgement. So here, for example, we can see the acknowledgement for the funding agencies as well as the person that he or she has the contribution with our works. Okay, now is the harder thing is the how to start the right to international journal. The hardest thing is the first step. So make it the first step easily. What is the easily step when we determine want to write the paper? So in my case, maybe the methodology is the easiest way to write first, because we have the method, established method, existing method, so we can very easy to write the methodology. After that, maybe the abstract can stand alone. So abstract can we write in the end of our manuscript. Don't forget, if you want to submit in the if you want to submit manuscript in the journal, so you can also download the latest journal, because sometimes it's very harder to write the items for author. Many pages and many instructions, but the simple way you can download the latest journal and then you can compare, is it correct or no? When you write the citation, for example, what is the structure of journal, you can compare with the latest journal that are already online in the website. Some tips also, you have to think and then you have to write in the formal scientific style, because this is scientific paper, not newspaper. If newspaper, maybe we can say we can very easy to write, and but for the scientific style, we have to see what is the guidance. And write complex sentences, but not too long and not too short. And avoid multiple statements in one sentence, so it will make confusing the readers. Don't forget to use the grammar and punctuation with the correctly. And sometimes I found maybe like the students, sometimes they have the mistaken in the written. For example, they choose the past tense, although they will tell something in the present or future. So you have to be careful for the grammar. So this is the process of the research and publication process. So after you complete your research, you prepare your manuscript and submit an assignment and peer review decision. There are two decisions, rejected or revision. After that, after revision, maybe you need revision and resubmission and review, acceptance and rejection. This is, for example, I give the example how to submit in the journal. For example, this is the fishery science in the website. Submission, I think we can, submission can be harder than you think. So that's why for the first time, you can see also in the website how is the regulation and how is the structure and also how to submit to the journal. So for example, here I already have the website and then I have the number in the fishery science. So here you can see the story. So I have the submission with decision 3 papers. And now if you want to submit the new one, so we can click the submit new manuscript. And then after that, we can see here step by step. After we click the submit, we can choose the article type. What is the article? It is the review article or short communication or research article. So after that, you can attach your file and then you can decide or give suggestion to the editors who will be the reviewer of your manuscript. So after we submit our journal, what is the next step? The next step is the harder one, is the review process and response. So there are two decisions of the submission of the journal. Accepted directly, but so far in my experience, this is the rare condition, accepted without revision. I never found for this case. So another decision, is it minor revision or major revision? So major revision, maybe you have to redevelop your manuscript. So you can just follow the suggestion of the editors or the authors. If the papers get revision, so it is important to carefully respond the reviewer comments. And another decision is rejected. So if we have the decision rejected, don't be sad for the authors. Okay. This is the strategy how to respond the reviewers. Don't forget to respond the reviewers with the seriously and politely to criticism, and answer all the points completely. And if you disagree with the authors or editor, you can explain exactly why in the polite and detailed manner. For example, this is just,
you have 2 minutes.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. For example, this is the response to the reviewer. This is very easy comment of reviewer. So reviewer just comment for the equation already revised as suggested. This is the answer from the author side. Another one is the example, the harder one. For example, the reviewers want to include the statistical treatment commented in the material and method section. We can say disagree with the reviewers. For example, here, thanks for your comment. Unfortunately, we have no replication for the data. So the statistical analysis was not performed. However, statistical analysis using completely randomized design data was carried out only for antioxidant activities. Therefore, we added information in subsection of statistical analysis as follows. So this is the example of the answer for the comment from reviewer. Another slide, we will give the result from the reviewer or from the editors for the acceptance of our manuscript. So the criteria of the acceptance, so our manuscript must be original. Our manuscript must have the novel or creative research methodology or has the new important research finding. So if this criteria is included in your paper, so your manuscript will be accepted. Now, this is the reason for rejection. The rejection maybe because of the poor experimental design, or maybe this is not the targeted of the journal. So that's why it's very important you see the scope of the journal, or you see the aim of the journal. Or many reasons also maybe like weekly written or presentation and language. Maybe also there is no important thing in the perspective of editor or reviewer. There is no something new finding. So this is just only my experience also. Just a few days ago, I got the information. We will publish in the Journal Food Science and Technology. So we are writing with the student, but unfortunately, we got the result completely rejected. But I have also the experience in this journal already accepted and then already published in the 2018. So it's very hard to write the journal. You can see here, we need maybe 1 year to write and then to accept it and then to publish our journal. So that's all my sharing for today. Thank you, Fahalis.
Thank you very much, Professor Nuril Mala, for presenting the scientific writing tips and strategy. So it is important to get both view from foreigners and also local, like Dr. Nuril Mala, because we have the same difficulties on how to publish our papers. So while waiting the questions to Dr. Nuril Mala, I have two questions already to Professor Andreas Lopata. So I'm going to read the questions. Professor Lopata, are you still there? So maybe he's still here, but he said that he will be on and off. So
I think he has a practical session today, so and then he has practical session in the
okay.
so maybe he will, but he will come back.
Okay, so we will put all the questions later after the sessions of Prof. James Bell. So please, all attendees, write your questions here in the Q&A features. So I'm going to read them all after all the sessions today. So because here right now we have Professor James Bell with us. Okay.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm really good. How are you, James?
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Good.
So Prof. Andreas, I just mentioned that all questions I will be pulled in the end of all sessions. So we'll have more time to give participants to give questions in the Q&A features. I hope you don't mind of this. Yeah, okay. So yeah, but before going to Professor James Bell, on the behalf of organizers of Embrio International Workshop, we wish to extend our thank you to Dr. Nuril Mala for her time and knowledge. We would like to handing over the certificate. So thank you very much for your time and knowledge and sharing with us. But I hope that you are still with us until today to give more knowledge about the questions and answer. So thank you, Professor Nuril Mala.
You're welcome.
So excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with our last guest of the plenary, I would like to invite Professor James Bell to deliver his plenary speech. So I'm going to introduce him first. Professor James Bell is a marine ecologist with a broad range of interests in marine organisms and systems. His early interest in marine biology was driven by his love and of the oceans as he grew up in Devon. So he studied undergraduate degree in marine biology at the University of Wales, Bangor in the North Wales. And then after completing his BSc, he returned to Ireland to complete his PhD at the University College Cork under the supervision of Dr. David Barnes. His PhD focused on the unusual sponges assemblage in the Love Hind, and he continued to be intrigued by this important group of marine invertebrates. So after his completing his PhD in 2001, he continues his passion in the field and become increasingly interested in the applications of molecular tools to marine ecology. He also traveled to Indonesia to work on the tropical sponge assemblage of the Wakatobi regions, a project that he continued to work until today. He also part of history of Embrio International Summer Course. So we have 2 or 3 times of Embrio field course to Wakatobi and Seribu Islands. In June 2006, as a senior lecturer in marine biology and director of Master of Marine Conservation Program at the Victoria University of Wellington, he was promoted to associate professor in marine biology in 2014 and professor of marine biology in 2019. His work is predominantly focused on the ecology of sponges and ongoing project across the world. So today, Prof. Bell will be sharing with us about how to write a research grant on marine conservation biology. So without further ado, please welcome Professor James Bell. Time is yours.
Thanks, Howie. Would you share my screen?
Yes, please.
Get the right one. Can everybody see that? You can see that, Howie?
Yes.
Awesome.
Clear.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Howie, for the introduction. I just noticed in the picture you had up of there and me on the screen, I'm actually still wearing the same shirt, but I have changed it in between that picture that was a couple of years ago. But thank you very much to the organising committee for inviting me to come and give this presentation today. It's actually quite nice to be asked to come and talk about something slightly different. I am, as Howie says, interested in lots of different things, but I have a quite strong interest in working on sponges and sponge ecology. So there may be a few references to sponges that arise as I give my presentation this afternoon. But what I'm predominantly going to talk to you today about is how to write research grants, or at least how to try and approach and write research grants. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be successful. But hopefully, some of the hints and tips I'll give you this afternoon will at least help you as you start to think about preparing research grants. You might be thinking, why is a sponge ecologist been asked or telling you about writing marine conservation grants? Well, I guess over the last 10, maybe last 15 to 20 years of my career, I guess I've been successfully awarded somewhere in the region of maybe $12 million of research funding, both directly as principal investigator and as part of larger grant applications as well. So I've had, I guess it's fair to say I've had a fair share of successes, but also probably a much greater number of unsuccessful applications. And the only way you really get research funding is to apply for lots of different things. So I guess my presentation starts with the issue that we're all facing as research scientists, that in order to conduct research, we need money. So whether it be for field work or consumables or to pay for salaries, we need money to go out and actually do the research that we want to do. And unfortunately as well, that there are many more great ideas and many more research projects than what there are research funds for in the world. Having said that, there are an increasingly large number of places to get money from. A lot of the time, though, it's actually finding those different sources and then applying to them. The other issue that we all face is that despite there being lots of places where we can apply to grant funding, generally most grant awarding organisations have relatively low levels of success in actually getting a research grant. So just some examples. Obviously, my experience is not particularly with applying for funds in Indonesia. But I have been involved in applying for funds for New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Ireland, and the US. But NERC is one of the major grant awarding bodies in the UK from the government, and their success rate is about 10 to 15%. NSF in the US is a lot higher than that. Is about a third of grants are funded in the NSF, but it's worth noting as well that most of those go to a smaller number of perhaps larger, more well-known principal investigators. So as a new person coming along, the success rate would probably be lower. In the marine kind of conservation field, lots of people out there probably will be familiar with the Paddy Foundation. They provide small grants to marine conservation projects across the world, and they typically fund about 10% of the applications. So only 1 in 10 of the applications they receive is actually going to get any money. And in most cases, they're relatively small amounts of money. The major grant body in New Zealand that funds kind of blue skies research is called the Marsden Fund, which is a government-funded program. And the success rate of that is around 8%. I've been lucky enough to get money from the Marsden Fund in the past, but in that case, it took me 5 applications and 5 rounds with the same grant, improving it year over year to actually get that grant across the line. So I said to you earlier on that I've been lucky enough to get around $12 million worth of grant funding over the last few years, and I use the word lucky there. So lots of people, when they talk about getting grants, talk about luck. You know, I've been really lucky this year. I've got all this money, but I'd like to suggest that while there is certainly an element of luck to getting research grants, there's also a real need to be targeted in your approach to trying to get money. And it's a long process typically to be successful in getting grants in marine conservation or in any other field. It isn't something that just happens overnight. I guess a critical place to start with all grant applications is, it sounds straightforward and simple, but you need to think about what your idea is. You need to think what it is that you're going to do that's going to be substantially different from what anybody else has done before, and that is going to capture the imagination of the people who are working and assessing your grant applications, such that they're going to give your proposal high priority and give you some money. And it's not easy to come up with new original ideas. It's often your ideas are going to be constrained perhaps to some degree by the background that you already have. But you need to think, what is the key idea that you're going to present to the grant funder. Some good places to start when thinking about this is to really think about what the focus is of your research proposal. What is the topic? Why is it important? And why should you do it now? Those are really important questions. What aspect of marine conservation do you want to focus on? What really big picture thing are you looking at that makes those grant funders think, now is the time that this should be funded? What are the actual questions, the specific questions that you're trying to answer? And in my experience, most of the applications that I write these days are very much hypothesis driven. What is the hypothesis that you're going to test? In many cases, it might not actually be a completely 100% testable hypothesis. It might be a bigger idea that you have that this research grant that you're writing will lead to answering. It may be a much bigger question than the single research proposal itself. You also need to think about how you're going to do this work. What are your research methods? What is going to be particularly innovative about your project? In my experience, some of the best research grants are those that take, innovative methods that have been applied in one way and then using them to address something completely different in a really novel way. But how are you going to do this work? It's all very well having a great idea, but you need to have some idea of how you're going to actually do it. You also then need to demonstrate what's the significance of your project. Why is it important? Why should it be done? And that's often, really difficult to get across. But at least in the marine conservation field, there's often quite important outcomes if something isn't done. The other thing to think about when you're thinking about your ideas is, and particularly in this field of marine conservation, is thinking about the implications of what not doing this project will mean. If there's a need to understand the impacts of sedimentation from dredging on coral reef communities, if we don't fund the research to find that out, what is the implications of not having that information? i.e., if there's a sedimentation event, then all those corals might die. The other critical thing, which in my experience, we're all really bad at as scientists, is actually discussing our ideas with colleagues, and particularly with close colleagues, and getting feedback. We tend to get siloed into this idea of writing research grants. We send them off to review, similar to what we do with papers, and we don't spend enough time talking it through with our colleagues, and getting feedback. And I find that a really useful thing to do, is to get colleagues' feedbacks, and including people who might not necessarily be directly linked to the project. But getting that input from other people is really, really important. The other thing to think about at this stage is, what actually do you need the money for? There are a whole range of things on which you could spend grant funding on, and deciding on where you go for funding will be influenced very much by what you want the money for. Are you looking for money for some kind of preliminary project? Some small pot of money that might then go on, provide you with some summary, some preliminary information that you can then use to support a much larger grant. Is the money to support dissertation students, so PhD students or master's students doing research? There are scholarships for those kind of things. Are you looking for a postdoctoral researcher? That's going to be probably a much more expensive grant, because you're going to need to include overhead costs and those kind of things, and pay a full salary to somebody. Are you looking for funds for specific experiments, for laboratory work, molecular consumables, those kind of things? Are you planning on going on field work? Again, you might find that there are specific grants, specific grant funding agencies that will provide money for these key things. Are you looking for salary costs? If you're looking for salary costs, there may be limitations as to the types of grants that you can look for. Are you planning to run a workshop like the Embrio workshop that we're all at today? There are often places that will provide specific funds for those things. Do you need equipment? Are you looking for travel costs or conference funding, for example? Again, there are often small pots of money associated with different organisations for those things, and particularly for students. The other thing to think about is, how big is your project? Is it a really, really big project that's going to need millions of dollars to do? Or is it a smaller project that, may only run for a year and you only need tens of thousands of dollars to do? I'm expecting at the end people are going to ask me all sorts of questions around where they can get funding from. Well, the simplest answer to where you find the sources of funding is a Google search, and spending lots of time looking for these different places. There are a whole range of kind of broad categories of places where I look for money, and where I've got money from in the past, and where lots of my colleagues working in conservation and marine science fields look. Probably for most countries, the initial places people look is towards their government funding schemes. I know Indonesia, I'm not super familiar with those, but I know some of my colleagues in Indonesia have had government funding over the years from different sources and different schemes. And it's a really important source of funding for most scientists across the world. You may also find that aside from specific government funding schemes, that management agencies themselves, park authorities, those kind of things, may have their own funds to support smaller bits of research on their own. There are also funding often available from NGOs, the likes of WWF and TNC. While they do fund a lot of research themselves and focus on their own activities, there are often opportunities to partner with these organisations. And while they may not have specific schemes for funding that you can apply to, if you can make contact with these organisations, often you can discuss and talk about joint research opportunities and collaborations. And there are also often opportunities from working with industry organisations. Obviously, in the marine conservation field, that can sometimes lead to potential conflicts of interest. There are often money from oil, gas, mining and fisheries operations, which you may feel kind of conflicted. Personally, I've worked with the fishing industry and the the oil industry in the past to look for conservation gains. And it depends on the project. The thing I've always been clear about is that when working with those organisations, that the results I find are the results I find. Whether they like them or not is irrelevant. And if they're funding the science, they get the results the same as everybody else. You may also find that there are funding opportunities through private organisations, particularly zoos and aquariums, and that's particularly the case if you're working on some kind of endangered species or some high-profile charismatic species, if you're a marine mammal researcher or something that people really connect with. And there are often, a lot of the zoos actually have conservation outreach programs where they'll fund students, they'll fund travel and those kind of things. You'll also find that there are a whole load of professional organisations. Good examples are the British Ecological Society in the UK, the Royal Society in the UK. Some of these you have to be members of, some of them you don't. You can apply for funding as a non-member. And these are usually smaller pots of money, but can also be much larger pots in some cases. Then there are a whole range of small foundations, particularly the marine conservation one that springs to mind, that if you're interested in getting money for conservation and only need a small amount of cash, then the Paddy Foundation is a really good place to go. And they fund quite a large number of grants every year. As I said, the funding success is quite low, but they fund quite a large number of grants over each year. Then the really hard ones to get money from. These aren't in any particular order of how easy it is to get money from these places, but in my experience, getting funding from the larger foundations, things like the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are typically very hard. They don't, usually most of these big foundations don't have a kind of open grant round that you can apply to, and you mostly need to know people who know people to get an opportunity, at least to get large amounts of opportunities to get funding from these. It can be difficult to approach. The other increasingly important source of funding for marine conservation is through private donors and through donations from independently wealthy people. And more recently, that's where I've been looking for funding for my projects is working with our university to identify, and particularly alumni of the university who might be interested in supported conservation projects. There's an increasingly large number of people, it seems, out there who have got large amounts of money in their pocket and want to spend their money helping out and doing important and good things in marine conservation. Stepping back a bit from thinking about the funding agencies, you need to think about yourself and building your research prowess and building your CV prior to applying for funding. Most funding agencies will want to know about you as the applicant, and they will want to be sure that firstly you're a respected person in your field. And secondly, that there's a strong chance that you're going to be able to lead this project and make sure that it's completed and finished. So where you need to think and start thinking as early as possible about building your CV and trying to be very strategic about how you do that. You need obviously a good publication record, regular publications in as good a journals as possible. I guess that's obviously an aim mostly for everybody. Nobody aims to publish in the worst journals possible. Everybody's always looking to publish in the best journals possible. But that's also important that it's relative to opportunities. So if you're a young, early career researcher, people assessing your grant application aren't going to expect you to have hundreds of publications. It's also those other things around the edges of a CV that are really important. Things like applying for grants, awards, prizes, big and small. These can help. They just make you look, I guess, or show that you're an increasingly respected scientist. Other things you can do is serving on professional bodies, panels, editorial boards, conference committees, both related to your field and more broadly. For example, I'm on the editorial board of several journals, including Bioscience. I've helped to organise the last few international sponge conferences. These are things that just demonstrate that you're emerging or you're a leader in your field, so that when people view your grant application, they feel confident that you're going to be able to do and achieve the work that you've proposed. You should also think about making sure you've got a good range of collaborators, both national and international collaborators, and they demonstrate your ability then to work with others in a team. Most science these days is done as teams, it's not done by individuals, so you need to, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but you need to pull together a team. Probably one of the most fundamental rules when applying for grant funding, it doesn't matter whether it's in marine conservation or in medical science or in any other type of field, is you need to know the rules of the funding body. It may seem a really obvious thing to do, but every funding organisation or agency or donor will have their own mission and priorities and their own set of rules. If you're dealing with a private donor, that might not always be the case. But if you're dealing with some government agency or some well-known foundation, they will have a rule book and a list of what you should do as an applicant, probably 40 or 50 pages long. And one of the things that you should do first of all is make sure that you read those instructions very, very, very carefully, and in particular knowing the deadlines. Most grant awarding bodies will not accept any applications under any circumstances once it's past the deadline. It's also really useful if you can find out the people who are actually responsible for assessing your grant. So who will be the people who will look at your grant? And that might influence the way that you write your grant and how you tailor some aspects of how you write. For example, if you know that somebody on the panel is going to be, or there's half a dozen molecular ecologists, then you want to be extra careful about the bits that you talk about molecular ecology, so it really shows that you know what you're talking about. It's also useful if you have any queries at all to contact the organisation. Most funding bodies are very happy to receive calls from people if you've got queries about the application process. That is, if you don't have a kind of internal research, department within your university that helps you with these grants and things. Also, many of these funding agencies will have their own templates as well. So they may have a template that they want you to put your CV information into. They may have an application form. And they may have very specific guidance over things like page limits, number of references, and those kind of things. However, not always is it the case that there will be an application form or any guidance at all. As I said to you a minute ago, I'm increasingly been looking for money from donors to support my research here back in New Zealand. We have quite a large charitable foundation called the George Mason Charitable Trust, which is based in the middle of northern New Zealand. And basically, this organisation has a mission priority to help conservation, but there's no application forms, there's no indication of how you apply for funding. So in this case, what we did, this is the first page of a kind of glossy magazine that we produced to sell our idea to the charitable trust. So you need to think about the funder and take an approach that's suitable for that. So I want to move on a little bit more about talking about the actual writing of the proposal itself. Now, bear in mind, this is a kind of very general, broad overview, and you'd need to adapt this depending on where you're applying for funding, or depending on what is asked for by the funding body. Typically, first of all, you want to think about the structure of your application. It should be a nice, brief title. It should be really explicit, and it should be very obvious from the title what it is you want to do. Most applications will require some kind of abstract overview or summary. In some cases, these can be really, really short. They may only be, 150 words. Sometimes they're a bit longer. And in this summary, you really, really need to capture very, very specifically what it is you want to do. Because quite often, if there are, hundreds of these applications, they may, read over the abstract and then make an initial cut based on the abstract and not go any further. Next, you should have some kind of introduction and background. And you'd expect your introduction and background to really demonstrate what your proposal is going to address. What is the gap in our knowledge? What is the urgency to do this piece of research? And what is the research that's gone before it? And why is this just so important? You then move on at some point in that very early stage in your proposal to very specifically state what the question is that you're addressing, or what the hypothesis that you're going to test. Quite often within the proposal as well, I would bold that. I'd put it in bold font. So anybody looking at that page, it will stand out really clearly what it is you're trying to address. After you've provided all the background, then you would go on to describe your approaches and methods. And again, depending on the grant funding agency, sometimes places want lots of detail, others just want a general overview. And they'll make some assumptions based on the members of your team and based on your experience that you can do these methods. So usually that section is relatively short. Then finally, usually most grants will require some kind of indication of what the outcomes or outputs are going to be. And what is it that is going to be produced from your grant if you're successful and you get to the end of your grant and do all the work that you propose? What will be the outcome of your research? So you might have outputs, which might include your journal publications or conference outputs, but there may be broader outcomes. For example, you might get a better understanding of how coral reef or seagrass or mangrove ecosystems work, how they're linked or whatever. But again, when you're looking at this structure, really check the instructions and see what the funder is actually looking for or asking for. One of the things that's often really important, and I include in nearly all the grants that I write, is some kind of supporting data. So this again goes back to that idea of funding applications just don't happen overnight. Usually they're many years in the making. So I usually, when I'm thinking of new ideas, I'm thinking of approaches, then I start to typically use my students to help me out, but usually collect some kind of supporting data. For example, what you're looking at here is some data that was included in a grant application to the New Zealand Marsden Fund, which was funded a few years ago, where we were basically looking at the climate change impacts on sponges, and we'd done some preliminary experiments, and we presented that experimental evidence to support our hypothesis that sponges might do better in the future under future climate change scenarios. We have some data, not very good data, but bits and pieces of data, and we included that figure in the grant application to demonstrate that we'd done some background work to support our wider hypothesis. Supporting is really important because it gives confidence to the assessors that you've really thought about this idea. It's something you've been thinking about for a while, and you've got some evidence to support the hypothesis that you're proposing. It is really important that it's relevant, and it doesn't need to be published. So quite often I'll use data that we might have generated in the lab that we haven't got around to publishing. It might be some of our real most recent data, or it may be bits and pieces of data that we collected as something that was very short and wasn't quite enough to make a publication. So just because it's not published, as long as it's your own data, it's fine to include that. Again, it requires planning. It requires you to think about, your grant probably a lot earlier than the grant application deadline. And also, it's a good way of using seed funding so small amounts of funding, something like the Paddy Foundation. You might provide some initial data from that then could feed into a much larger grant application. I often use figures as well to demonstrate key processes. This is another one from the same grant application where we plan to develop a model an ecosystem model to represent what sponge-dominated reefs might look like. This was what we included in the application to demonstrate the kind of concept of what the model was going to look like and what the model was going to include. So it can be quite often a good idea if you're going to include some kind of modeling component to have some kind of figure that illustrates that. And again, ideally, perhaps this would have been in color, but it would be it's nice to give these representations, and then it's just not blocks and blocks and pages of text as well for people to read. And this is something that from a grant that I'm in the process of writing just at the moment, summarizing the processes that are influencing temperate mesophotic communities. So those communities that are at the limit of light penetration in the ocean. You obviously get them in coral reef environments as well. But the other cool thing about figures is you can get a lot of information into a figure, which would take you loads and loads of text to write. So you can demonstrate the processes here that might take a page of text to explain. But I can have this as a small figure that might use up a lot less space and be much more informative and interesting to readers. I also often use figures and diagrams to explain experimental approaches that we're going to use. So again, this is another grant application actually by one of my students who was going to look at nutrient fluxes in sponges, and the experimental setup was relatively complicated. So rather than trying to write that out and it being really dull and really boring, we decided that we would produce a little figure to demonstrate conceptually what the experimental approach was going to do. And it's quite usual for people to include figures and diagrams to explain these processes within their grant applications. The other thing, so when you're also thinking about writing your proposal, it's also really important to consider assembling the best team. And you'll see my picture here. This is when New Zealand assembled its best team for the Rugby World Cup in 2015, and we were the winners of the Rugby World Cup. In most recent years, we didn't quite have the best team, and we didn't win. And having the best team is really important to making sure that the grant assessors can see that you're going to be able to complete the work that you're proposing. You should pick your collaborators carefully. While it might be tempting to just find people and email them and say, will you be involved in my grant? I generally really like to know the people that I'm going to collaborate with, and I have worked with them and known them personally before, because otherwise it can cause problems later on if you clash or you have different ideas as to how the project should run. It's also quite important to match the skills needed to complete the project with the right person. So if you're going to be doing, I don't know, whole genome sequencing, it's pretty important that someone in your team has got experience of whole genome sequencing. It's also really useful to identify people who have had success with that particular funder or the funding agency that you're applying to previously. So they'll have hopefully some kind of track record with the agency, and will then look at your proposal more favorably. Ultimately, most grant awarding bodies want to give you the money, and when they've given you the money, they really want you to do the work and finish the work that you propose. That's kind of, otherwise, you know, they've failed in terms of what their overall aim is. It's also often useful to include people with strong track records. It can bolster your chances, make your application look stronger, because they'll be able to, even if they're not going to be heavily involved in the project, they can provide some kind of oversight and provide information and help when needed. And it's also useful if sometimes the team has actually worked together before, so you can demonstrate already that you're a strong scientific unit. And it's also really important to identify what people are going to do. So usually, rather than just listing 30 people on your grant, that's kind of a joke. You shouldn't be, maybe 5, 6, 7 people would be more than enough. You should, as well as identifying those people, you should have some indication in your proposal as to what it is each one of those is going to do. What is their responsibility? One might be responsible for field experiments. One might be responsible for stakeholder engagement, and whatever those processes might be. It's also, most proposals will require you to have some kind of timelines and milestones. So really the idea is you need to demonstrate when your specific goals are actually going to be met. And some kind of timeline that demonstrates when different parts of your project are going to be completed. They should be realistic, they should be measurable, and they should be specific, and they should show the links between the different parts of your project. So they should show a kind of progression as to how you're going to get to the end of your project. It's increasingly important, particularly in marine conservation as well, to give some indication of how you're going to communicate your science. With marine conservation grants in particular, most organisations want to know how you're going to interact with end users, how people are going to take up your knowledge or your new knowledge that you're going to create by completing your grant. So typically this includes some kind of stakeholder plan. How are you going to communicate your science to the people who might use it? This might include some kind of workshops with local communities and important stakeholders. Might include social media posts, which are increasingly important. I usually say with most of my grants, I'll make sure that the university will help me produce at least 2 or 3 social media posts via Facebook or Twitter over the course of each project. To share that information and also to promote the funding agency too. You might want to communicate your information to the general public through general lectures. Obviously, as scientists, we're always looking to publish in the peer-reviewed literature, but I wouldn't just say that you're going to do that. I'd be very specific about where it is you're going to publish the paper. Chances are it probably won't end up being published there, but at least it gives a view that you thought about where it would be suitable and why it would be suitable for specific journals. Same with conferences. I would usually make sure that I would include within a grant or larger grant application the opportunity for the research to be presented both nationally and internationally. But again, I would be specific and targeted at the conferences that I said I was going to present the information at. You can obviously promise to create ResearchGate project pages, and you might also communicate that science through incorporation in your teaching material if you're involved in university lecturing or other forms of communication. You may communicate your science through the production of patents or commercialization. There may be important products that you're going to produce, natural products, for example, and that'd be another way that you might communicate your science. Increasingly important as well is what you're going to do with your data when you've finished your project. Where are you going to put it? In the olden days, we filled in our lab books or our field books and we stuck them on our shelves. We wrote our papers and the data just shared there. Increasingly, funding agencies want to make sure that the data you collect is shared with other people, so they can use it perhaps in other ways to create models or in the future compare with your data. So often places want to plan to know what you're going to do with that as well. The other thing to think about is your budget. How much money that you're actually going to need, and how much money and what it's going to be spent on. When you're writing your budget, it needs to be easy to follow. So you should spell out, what you're going to spend on people costs, what it's going to cost to travel. If you're going to do 2 trips to the Wakatobi each year, what does each trip cost and what's the total of that cost? And for your research cost, if you're buying equipment, it's often useful to get specific quotes from the manufacturers, so you know very specifically how much the grant is going to need to pay for those costs. It's also important that those budget items match your aims and objectives. So you're not asking for pieces of equipment or travel to places that don't match up to specific activities that you've outlined in your main grant proposal. And they should also be realistic and use actual figures rather than guesstimates of things. Grant funding agencies typically don't like to see guesstimates of how much or approximations. They like to know exact figures. If you're going to fly somewhere, they want to know that you've been to a travel agent and you've asked them how much it's going to cost to New Zealand to Indonesia, for example. It's also typically much harder to negotiate at the end. Hard to negotiate at a later stage, more money from funding agencies. Once the money is awarded, it's very hard to change usually what you spend that money on. And it's also worth bearing in mind that the amount of money that you're given is often cut. So you might ask for $20,000, but more often than not, you might get $15,000 or $10,000. That tends to be fairly typical. It can be quite disappointing sometimes, but that's just the way it is. It means, for example, the Paddy Foundation can support 2 research projects rather than maybe 1. Often, if grants are cut, I use that as an opportunity to scale back on the things that I'll say that I'm going to do. So actually, I end up with not having to achieve quite so much because the money they've given is less. The other thing to think about is what else you can give to the project or what you can give other people to give to the project. So finding kind of matching an in-kind contribution, and lots of conservation organisations look at this really favourably. Looks like you've gone out and you made the effort to find funding and resources from other organisations and from other places. Examples might include research students that might be funded from other sources, or fee-paying students if they're master's students. And it might include your own time. So quite often, and particular donors that provide money for our work here in New Zealand, they don't want to pay for my time, they want to pay for research costs. So the university will donate my time for free, if you like. You might be able to use or suggest access to specific facilities or resources that you've got, office space, boat time, matching of bench fees. Or sometimes, if you're really lucky, you might get direct financial contributions from elsewhere. So you can use one grant to help you get another one. Hopefully you're successful and you get your grant, and once you do, you'll probably have to go through some kind of reporting process. Some grants are actually really onerous in terms of grant reporting. Some of our government-funded grants in New Zealand require actual reporting every month as to the progress you've made and what the funding you've spent. More often than not, if it's a longer grant, it'll be every 6 months to every 12 months that you're be required to give a report. And usually if it's a smaller grant, you might be asked to give a report just at the end. Handing in your report on time and doing a really good job of that is the key to getting more funding from that same funding agency in particular, but also from different funders, because sometimes they talk. It's really important within those reports to be honest. If things haven't worked out, grant awarding agencies expect things sometimes to not work. So if your project really goes really badly, then it might be worth contacting the funder to discuss that problem with them, rather than leaving it to the end and writing a terrible report and trying to hide those things. If there are issues, it's usually good to identify them and discuss them early on. Definitely don't be late with reports. That's really bad, and most agencies give you a really black mark for trying to get money again. Also, in terms of management and reporting, one thing that I find with my grants is it's really important to let the people know what's happening within the project. So if you've applied for quite a large sum of money and you've got 6 or 7 overseas and national collaborators, or even at your own institute, it's really good to provide them with regular updates so they still feel connected to the project and you maintain those relationships. There are also some organisational level considerations. But this is, I guess, for the university high level management to consider. We're very lucky at Victoria and all the universities that I've ever worked at to have a dedicated research office, which actually helps us with our research grant applications. They help with things like identifying funding sources. They proofread our grants. They help with stakeholder engagement. They help produce the graphics sometimes for the grants, so that the pictures and the supporting data information, not the data itself, but the production of the figures. And they help us in the development in any way that they can, and really help in the quality, or improve the quality. It's important to realise for organisations and the universities, the higher management, to appreciate that it takes a lot of time to develop really good research proposals, and staff need to kind of be given relief from other duties to be able to do that really well. And those support teams can be really important in providing or making grants really good. And we also keep, this is internal, so unfortunately it's not something I can share with the audience today, but we keep a database of all previous grants, successful ones that people have written within the university. And we allow access to anybody who works at the university to those previous grants. So you can see the sorts of things that different organisations have funded, and it helps you to identify funding priorities. Also, we have internal peer review systems. So some of our major grant applications each year, we will pass out applications among academics, sometimes from different fields as well, to get input. It's also important for universities to provide that seed funding to generate that supporting data if you want to be applying for those bigger grant applications. And the universities can also help with those ethics through committees. As I said at the very beginning of my earlier slides, most grants don't get funded. That's a simple fact, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. But many funders will provide you feedback, and if they don't, it's not unreasonable, I don't think, for you to ask. Some of the places like the Paddy Foundation receive so many grant applications that they'd spend their year responding to people if they provided feedback to everybody. But there's no harm in asking organisations to provide feedback if you're not successful. If you do get feedback, it's really important to use that feedback to refine your proposal. I've had several proposals that have got funded by an agency after 3 or 4 goes of submitting that grant. So successive years, keep refining the proposal, and hopefully eventually it'll get funded. It's also important to realise that the people who assess grants and their priorities and the priorities of the organisations change over time as well. So if you've got a really good idea and it doesn't get funded this year, sit on it for a couple of years. And who knows, the people assessing it will likely change over a couple of years, and you may be successful. I also quite often recycle my applications, so I'll put together big packages of work for large grants, and then I'll break those down to smaller bits to apply for smaller amounts of money, or to use for student-funded projects, or for dissertation students and things. So recycle those projects and reuse them is a really good way to go. So just a few kind of final tips, I guess. If you're going to apply for funding, find out the deadlines and start thinking about it really early. Grant proposals don't happen overnight. They take months to write, and in some cases they take years to write. And you need to come up with an idea and build it. The other thing to do is apply early and often. Don't be disheartened if you don't get funded straight away. Most people don't. As I say, most grant applications are unsuccessful ones. When you're looking at the guidelines, make sure you answer all of the questions and fill in all the sections, and make sure that you give the grant funding body the information that they're asking for. If you're rejected, revise it, apply again. You can apply to different organisations or the same organisations, but just make sure you take on board any feedback. Always follow the grant application guidelines exactly. I can't tell you how important that is. It's really, really important. Often, some grant funding agencies, if you've not got the right font that they've asked for, or the right font size, they won't consider the grant, because it means the number of words you've got on a page is more than other people, so they deem it unfair. Other thing to do when you're writing and you're thinking about your writing specifically is make sure you're explicit and specific. And what I mean by that is, if you say you're going to do something, say exactly how you're going to do it. Be really explicit in the journals that you say you're going to apply for, the animals that you're going to work with. If you're doing climate change experiments, for example, the specific temperatures that you're going to expose your animals to, all of those specific bits. Don't be vague in what you're planning to do. Also, you need to be realistic. If you're being given $1 million for 3 years, it might sound like a lot of money. I mean, it is a lot of money, but there's still a limit to what you'll be able to do with that money. Also, make sure that there are connections between your research questions and the objectives or hypotheses and your methods. So usually what I do in my grants is I write down my specific, I might have a bit of introduction, I might list my specific aims or my specific questions, and then I'll have a section in the methods that deals with each one of those specific aims. So the links between the different parts of the project are really, really really obvious. You want to make it really easy for the people reading and assessing your proposal. And I'll say again, even though I've said it above and I've said it on previous slides, but follow the application guidelines exactly. That's really, really critical. There's nothing that is more annoying than when you're reviewing grants. I also do a lot of grant review as well. There's nothing worse than people have not followed the guidelines, and quite often they just don't get funded because people can't follow the guidelines. And the other really key thing is to make sure you you get other people to read your proposal and get them to provide feedback. So that's all I've got to say about sharing some of my experiences and thoughts on writing grants. Those things don't really just apply to marine conservation grants. They apply more broadly to marine science grants generally. There are lots of places to apply for funding. You know, if you a Google search will find you various databases that are free in some cases. In most cases, where you can identify a large number of places that will potentially give you cash, but it does take time. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Bell, for presenting on how to write a grant proposal. So, yes, we need the money. We need the money to run our research proposal. So, right now we have several questions goes to you and also to Bumala. And unfortunately, I couldn't see Prof. Lopata right now. I hope he will come back to us.
He will join soon.
Yeah, I hope he will join us soon. So, Prof. James from Oktias Lutfi, is it possible to obtain funding not on behalf of organizations, but for personal research or for master or PhD research purposes?
So, I guess the answer to that, so from my experience, the university doesn't generally let me what we would call moonlight. So all research money for me personally has to come through the university. I can act as an external consultant, but there are funding agencies that will give money to individual students for scholarships. So for example, in New Zealand, we have a range of scholarships that are given to students. They're not given to supervisors, and students can take advantage of those. But most research grants from most places will want the research money to go through the organization. It also gives you more credibility, I think, to be applying through your institution rather than as an individual.
Okay, thank you. So I hope Octias will satisfied with that answer. So I have questions to Professor Nuril Mala. So coming from Lucita Mailana. So Bumala, what do you think about the article transfer offer decisions? Is it better to consider this over, or do you have any other suggestions?
Okay, thank you Pak Hafiz and Ibu Lucita for the question. So Ibu Lucita asked regarding the article transfer offer. So there are many reasons why the decision from the editor to transfer your article. Maybe because the scope or the article is not matched with the scope of the journal. Again, the important thing, you have to see very carefully the guidance of the author. So for example, the editors decided to transfer your article to new journal that you don't know previously, you don't know, you don't see the guidance author. And then after that, if the idea from the editor to transfer to the specific journal, you can see more detail. I have the experiences for that. So I tried to directly transfer. However, the editor said they don't receive directly the transfer journal because they also have many articles not from the transfer journal. So in my opinion, so it is better you resubmit to another journal without any suggestion from the previous editors. I think that's all my answer, Pak Hafiz.
Yes, Thanks a lot, Bumala, for the answer. So I'm going to deliver questions to Prof. Lopata. Thank you very much for waiting. So yeah, this is questions also coming from Lucita Meilana. So what do you think about wrong research results that has been already published? But yeah, it's unfortunate because the reviewers or editors didn't realize as well during the publication process.
So you mean basically somebody else published something very similar?
I
Is this
think
what they?
I think he the one. I mean,
Because you
yeah.
wouldn't publish twice your own data. So
Maybe in the both case, it's not really clear here. Probably like
yeah,
the
look,
publication realized that they are already published elsewhere.
yeah, look, if you submit something and you don't know that somebody else has published something similar, that's sometimes bad luck. The timing is there. And the only thing, if it gets rejected based on this, that somebody else published something very similar, the main thing is to take it and modulate it, modify it, and change the angle. I mean, no research, I think, should be just thrown in a bin and 1 or 2 years of work and a lot of money and time of students because of that. You just have to think a little bit out of the box. If you could do the interpretation of the data, if they could show also something else which another journal didn't show. I mean, what is not good is for just going and submitting to a lower impact journal and just keep it as it is. That would be not ethical. Yeah? So I mean, if you're aware of this, you have to approach it. And as I said, nothing is really identical. Maybe it was a different reason to do the study, a different technical approach, and different results. Yeah, maybe something. Even they did the same study. It's the same as like Professor James explained to you with getting the grant. You have to think really out of the box, especially when something comes back. And what Mala said, if it gets rejected, I still would address and think about using all the information you got from the editor and reviewers, why they reject the paper, modify this, address it, and submit it to another journal.
Thanks a lot, Prof. Lopata, Prof. Andreas. So
Thanks.
there is one question that I would like to ask three of you. So because this is our participant is coming from millennials, so newcomers in science. So most of them are students or early scientists. So do you think it's the same to publish in a low impact journal? Because as a beginner, somehow we just need to write and publish publication experience rather than high impact. So maybe start from Prof. Bell.
So a large number of my early papers are all in low impact journals. Based on, I guess, impact factor ratings, but they are some of my most highly cited papers. And also they were the things that gave me my name in my field and has enabled me to build up my career. So I think it's more about making sure that that work is done well. And I don't think people should get so hung up on impact factors. You know, that it's something that we push as being really important, or some people push as being really important, but it's more about how your work, and it's increasingly going to be this way, it's going to be more about how your research is taken up, what people do with that research rather than what publication that it's published in. For example, within our university, there's more interested in how many times a piece of work is cited rather than the journal that's necessarily in, or how people have used that research to learn something new, or how that research has been put into action to help the environment. So I wouldn't get too hung up on low impact journals. It's more about the uptake of that research.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Prof. Andreas?
Yes, so I support James completely there. that's what is really important, that people read the paper and people cite it. And they only cite it if they think the research is done well. And the impact factor is really kind of secondary. I know a lot of journals publish papers in Nature or Science. They actually have very low citation rates. You look some papers, they're 2-3 years old, they're 5 or 10 times cited, which really, and they're colleagues of mine. So you think, man, you spend a lot of time and money to get it there and showing off this impact factor, but it's I wouldn't say meaningless, but of course the impact is citation. And when you come actually in Australia and New Zealand, I think it's the same. If you apply for grants, you cannot just tell them, here, this journal, we published this in a journal impact factor 15.8. Nobody would be interested in this. So if it's a top ranking journal in the field, that's good enough, or it's a mid-tier. But what counts is how often it's cited. And also some of the best publications are absolutely mid-tier journals or small journals. Of course, if you're really new, PhD, masters, or early career researchers, the number kind of also counts. You need papers. If you have only 2 papers from your PhD as a first author in a super paper, and then you have for 5 years not one single paper, that's not good. You should try to get a momentum, 1 or 2 papers a year. And then first author is one. They can also be mid-tier author, but impact factor is definitely not the most important indicator.
Oh, that's really good point. So we have to keep the momentum after graduating from PhD. So I would like to ask Bumala, because she's representing us as a local. So what do you think about publishing as an early career scientist or master or PhD students? Please, Bumala.
Okay, thank you, Pawis. Regarding the impact factor, I think the impact factor is not the most important thing. So the important thing, what is the purpose of when you publish to the journal? You want to inform your idea, so you want to get the PhD degree, like Andrea said, maybe as a student. So just maybe you can do your research with the complete result, complete research, and maybe the perfect research. Then after that, you can try to publish in the, maybe for the beginning, not so highest impact factor, no need to do that. You can try maybe from the impact factor, like maybe around 1 point something. Don't do like jump to the highest impact factor. So actually depend on the completely of your research. If you feel your research is many new findings or new methods, or maybe very different with others researcher, so you can jump to the highest impact journal. But if you feel as researcher, I think you can feel your research by yourself. If you feel your research is not in the medium or in the law, so no need to get or to submit to the journal that it has the impact factor in the high track. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Bu Mala. So I'm glad that to hear from the local perspective. James, do we always need money for publications?
Yeah, that's actually something I didn't mention, is that I have to say I rarely publish in journals that require me to pay page charges, and that's simply because the amount of money it might cost me to publish in something with page charges, that amount of money might be the same amount of money as one of my field-based PhD students would spend in a year on their research. So I tend to avoid. I also tend to avoid the journals where it's a kind of pay-as-you-go. I won't. I mean, I won't say specific journals, but the ones where you've got to pay a fee and there's 4 million papers published every year. That's not my approach. There are plenty of really good journals out there where you don't need to pay. I think that there's an increasing place within grant applications for including money for page fees, but often that is to make sure that you provide the paper as a kind of open access option, so that everybody can have access to your paper. Yeah, that's a personal feeling about paying for page charges. Unfortunately, a lot of the higher impact journals do have page charges, but most larger grants will allow you to put in a small amount to cover those page fees. Personally, I just don't like spending money on that, and I guess that's just the way it is. I'd rather spend that on the sides, but I do have colleagues who are prepared to pay those large sums of money. That's just not me personally.
Thanks, James. Prof. Andreas, as you mentioned in your presentations, at the
Yeah.
covering letter, we should state the prior reviews or revision. Is it a review or revision from previous submitted papers in other journal or something else?
Yeah, so what I was referring to, let's say you get the paper back and you're indicated as a minor or major revision with 2 reviewers, and then you revise the paper. You have your rebuttal to the questions and of the reviewers, and in the cover letter, which you write a new cover letter, you will say, thanks for the comments by 2 or 3 reviewers, and please find attached the revision for this and this manuscript. So because editors have so many papers every day and every week, they just want quickly see, okay, is this a revision, go themselves through it and say, yes, it's acceptable, or do they have to send it now again back to the same reviewer? It just makes this process quicker and less and more foolproof if you add this in the cover letter again, that this is now the first or maybe the second revision. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to dig into 3 of you. If we already submitted a paper to a journal and there is no progress report or there is no progress, maybe like until 5 months, what should we do? Do you have any experience of any kind of this? Maybe starting from Bumala, like you submitted, but there is no progress on the, so we are waiting. And sometimes as local, we confuse what should we do to anticipate this. Please, Bumala.
Yeah, Pavis, thank you for the question. So I think as the author, we can ask the editors why our paper until now there is no information in the board, because we have the board, right, specific board. So for example, if you submit to Merindra, so after submission, you can get information from the editor, and then you can open the website and you can check the condition of your journal. If there is in the still review, so it means your paper now is under review. Or maybe there is no information, so it means there is no activities from editor. So if there is no activities and maybe a review still in the long time, for example, I have the experience, maybe more than 8 months, I'm waiting for the journal. Then I asked to the editor, what happened with my paper? Why there is no information until now, for example. Then after that, the editor answer, my paper in the review, and then the new update or new information I can get directly by email from the editor. If you feel that there is not convenient for you, you can take your paper and then you can change to other to other journal, I think. Okay, Pak Hawis.
Yeah. How about you,
Yeah,
James?
can I just add to this? I mean, if you resubmit to another journal, you actually have at first retracted.
Yeah.
It's very important. Otherwise, you're landing up and having the same paper submitted in 2 journals, and that's not allowed actually. So, but look, I would not wait for 8 months to wait. I would wait maybe 3-4 months at the latest. If you see no activity, but often what happens, maybe we submitted, I can just tell you, last year in one of these food chemistry journals, and we were told it will take 3 months before the editor has time to actually send it to reviewers. So we were already told we have to wait for 3 months before it even sent. And then it took another 2 months to get reviewers back. So that's a very, very long time. But at least as long you know what status where it gets stuck. You don't want to get stuck with the editor, but at least with the reviewers. Maybe they have 1 or 2 reviewers and waiting for a third one.
Yep.
So yeah.
How about you, James? Do you
Yeah,
have
I've had.
any?
I guess I kind of feel like I'm reasonably old, so I still remember the olden days where I used to print my papers off and send them to places, and then it was unusual if you got them back within like 8 or 9 months. I think 2 to 3 months waiting for an answer is is reasonable. I guess I do appreciate it from the other side as well, being an editor, and often the delay is actually finding people to review papers and then getting them to actually, once they've agreed to review it, to actually provide their reviews back. In most cases, I think editors send them out fairly quickly, and it's that review stage where people are super busy and it's hard to get reviewers and people to find time for them to do that. So I appreciate for everybody. Everyone wants to know and get their paper back as soon as possible. But I think I've had 2 cases where I have retracted a paper from a journal because it had taken too long. And I think I've had one where a journal, were basically like, well, we can't find any reviewers, so we suggest you find another journal for it. And that I think either of those, those are fine responses. It's just that you shouldn't have to wait, 9 months for that. It's more about having the information and knowing what's going on. So I don't think after 2 months or 3 months, emailing the editor is actually, I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
Okay, thanks. Prof. Andreas, so when there is a question from Desi. Whenever send my papers for publications in international journals, I'm usually asked to write the paper in a compact scientific writing style. This is our problem here.
Yeah.
I just want to know what are the essential components of scientific writing and how to develop it while writing papers in, for example, in aqua.
Yeah, look, it's basically what myself and Marla covered in within 1.5 hours. So once you get the PDFs from us, have a look at this and really stick to the structure. Because when you read the paper, you don't see necessary, if you're not experienced, the structure within the papers. But what we presented you, with the abstract, the introduction, and if you get this back from the reviewers, is usually it's not structured. It's a mix-up. So it's hard for the reader to get the story in the abstract and introduction, what the study is about. And maybe it's also too long. Maybe it doesn't adhere to the guidelines. It's much too long, has too many figures, no many tables, indicating the author didn't read the guidelines properly and doesn't adhere to them. And I would probably say that's probably the case. Most of the higher impact journals, they will straight away reject you. In others, they're more nice to you and tell you to make it more compact. It's too long.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for Andreas. So I think there are still several questions, but our time is limited here. I know that Prof. James also already almost 6. Yeah?
5 o'clock, 10 past 5, not too bad.
Yeah. So, but I have final questions to you all. I mean, I would like to get your opinion. So, I want one question: why international journal in high quality, for example, Q1 until Q3, very expensive for payment or publish? What do you think about that? I think we have praised this kind of issue.
I don't like paying for publication. I have to say, I know that journals have got costs to recover those kind of things, but I know that also the price that our library pays for stocking those journals.
Otherwise, James, just to add to this, I mean, that's all nice if you're in a Western society where the library is full of journals, but a lot of countries in the Middle East and Asia don't have the money, and that's where open access actually comes in. So I'm also co-editor on two of the frontier journals, and they're also quite expensive. And we do publish here and there in frontier journals, but I think one of the reasons is really this accessibility to researchers who do have small universities and no access to libraries. And even here, me and as James Cook, we don't have all the journals. So I have asked colleagues in Melbourne Uni to get certain articles because I don't have access to them. So, and I can imagine if you are somewhere in Asia or the Middle East, it's even harder, or South America for this matter, to get certain articles.
Do the frontiers journals, for example, places from submitters from Asia, would they be free for those countries?
Exactly, exactly. So there are policies, and a lot of people are not aware of this. In particular, Frontier, I guess others maybe also, there is definitely a fee waiver or fee reduction if you come from more developing countries with less financial impact. And definitely you should look at this. If you have the chance, you have usually a high impact factor and you have a great audience, everybody can read it, and you get it for free. So I can have a look actually and have a look how Indonesia sits, or at least with Frontier where I'm involved.
I think Indonesia is already, it's not
too rich.
No, it's out now. We are not in the list. It's in the
Yeah,
pool.
we are not in the
So
law.
that's the problem.
Okay.
So I think Bahawis,
Yeah,
for the
please, Bu
payment
Mala.
of the for the payment of the journal. So even for the first quartile or second quartile, I think many journal also no need to be paid. But maybe the limitation closed accession, not open access. So that is the problem. But not all the journal they have regulation. We have to pay with the high money.
Right. Thanks a lot for our three outstanding speakers. Before I hand it over the certificate to Prof. James Bell, I would like to ask you, each of you, to give a final statement on publications, because we have young researchers here, our participants, early career in Indonesia, also other countries. So please give a final statement, maybe like encouraging something like that. So maybe starting from Prof. Andreas, please.
Yeah, I could say it in 3 words: publish, publish, publish. That's what we all say. But I think really, people need to take early career researchers should take the angst away to publish, and it can be very confronting sending a paper off a manuscript where you spend a lot of time and then you get the feedback, make it more comprehensive and maybe submit again. So I think don't be shy. Already PhD students as well as early career researchers should start publishing as early as possible. And the universities maybe should run annual workshops like you're doing now and helping these researchers to get their good science out into the public, that other researchers can read it. That's
Thanks
in
a lot.
short.
Thanks a lot, Prof. Andreas. Bu Mala, please.
Yeah, I think maybe we have to change our mind that the writing paper is not writing paper should like our hobbies. Maybe if we change our mind like that, so after we complete the research, so I think we can write soon, and then we can slowly our idea can write very well, I think, if we change our mind. But if we change the writing journal is very hard, I think it will be hard. So I think depend on your mind. If your mind is very easy or very enjoyable to write it, so you will be enjoy. But if you feel very hard to write it, you will be hard. I think so, Pak Hawis.
Thanks a lot, Bu Mala. It's like a mind setting, yeah? So, Prof. James Bell, please.
Well, I guess my inspiring words is try not to be too hung up with impact factors. Everybody is talking about impact factors, whereas in many Western universities now, impact factors are not the way that people's science are judged, and it's going to be increasingly in the future how your science makes a difference and makes an impact, rather than the impact factor of the journal that you're publishing. My advice as well is is identify collaborators to work with your journals. You may be able to find people through links that like Hawis or your supervisors have that can help you improve your writing. And also would echo Prof. Andreas's comments in terms of the university is organising writing workshops where you maybe bring somebody in for 3 days, where students have got their publications and can be helped to write those, and staff as well. There are lots of opportunities, I think, and people who would be willing to come and do that.
Thanks a lot, Prof. James. So on behalf of the organizers of Embrio International Workshop and Embrio Committee, We wish to thank you to Professor Bell for his time and knowledge, but I would like to handing over the certificate. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you. Thanks, Hoist. Let's take a picture of it.
There will be a picture. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to close this plenary session. I'm very optimistic that all participants will already acquired a new skill and knowledge from today's plenary speakers. And I would like to encourage all participants to take active parts in the interesting discussion in next dissemination sessions, that to be able to conclude certain strategies and tips to improve our manuscript. In closing, I'm very much thankful to Embrio team for their diligent work in this international workshop and for our outstanding speakers. I wish all participants a fruitful and a joyful one-day workshop. Thank you very much. So I'm giving now to Sahrin to continue the workshop. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hoist. Thanks.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James. How are you, James?
Good, really good. How are you?
Thank you, James.
Fine, thank you.
Professor James, and thank you, Professor Andreas, and also Dr. Mala.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for all the speakers for the amazing sessions that we had before. And also, we would like to say thank you to our moderator, Dr. Havis Madupa. And we would like to give a token of appreciations to our moderator. The certificate will be given by Mr. Ronnie as the team leader of organizing committee.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Mr. Ronnie just told me that he has a technical problem with the computer. So yeah, he hand over the job to me.
So we will show this.
Okay, for Pak Hawis, thank you for your thanks for your contribution as a moderator in this session, which during a very joyful discussion between those three great speakers. So thank you very much, and hopefully we can still have a good time after this session.
Thank
So
you.
this is the certificate from the committee. Thank you.
Thanks all the speakers. And
on behalf of Pak Roni, I want to ask Professor James Bell, is that okay to share your presentation materials to the participants?
Yes.
Okay,
no
okay then. Yes, we will share all the materials to the participants, and the materials will be delivered through the link that we will send to the chat room. So just wait until we get the material from the speakers. And then, so next we have a break, and also, but before break, there is some information regarding the following session. For MC, can you please open your screen? For the next session, we will have a presentation and also coaching. Presentation will be in at 1 p.m. GMT plus 7. There will be two parallel 1 and parallel 2. The parallel 1 is using meeting ID, as you see here, but I will send the info in the chat. So there is in a chat room, there is a link, IPB link /info, that's the fourth way. So you can click that, and then you can search through important links, so you can find the links to do the presentation session and also coaching. For the coaching, unfortunately, it's only for pre-registered participants only, because we send your paper through to editor, and then they will give you a feedback, and you can discuss the feedback later on. So that's the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for all your time contribution to this event, especially to our special guests, Professor Andreas Lopata, Professor James Bell, and also Dr. Mala. Last but not least, is a very, very great moderator that we have today, Dr. Haris Madupa. Thank you so much. And also the MC, which is going to deliver this event also smoothly. Thank you so much, and we will see you again in the next session. Just keep that link, the IPB link info, because when we get the paper from the speakers, we will send it there. So you can just take that link regularly. Hopefully by today we can get all the presentation materials from the speakers. Is that possible, Professor Andreas, Professor James, and also Dr. Mala? So yeah, maybe or tomorrow you can check and hopefully it's already there. Paroni, welcome back, Paroni. So yeah, so this is the end of the webinar session. We can have a break for a while now before joining to the next session, the presentation session at 1 p.m. So finally, I close the session. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, James.
Yang terakhir ini yang paling kecil. Terima kasih banyak.
Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Silakan makan di tempat masing-masing.
Once again, there will be a presentation and coaching sessions after this at 1 p.m. And then make sure you are in the correct rooms and make sure your presentation are ready. If you have any questions about the presentation or the coaching sessions, you may contact the committee. Once again, this workshop would not be possible without the help of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science of IPB University and also the International Collaboration Office of IPB University. Enjoy the next sessions and have a nice day. The last I say, thank you for your participations and your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Sarin. Thank you, everyone.
Saya admit ya.